Chapter 8:10. With the help of the endless natural energy in Yuxiong Plain, the people around Wu Qi were undergoing earth-shaking transformations. Meanwhile, Princess Zhang Li's understanding of the primordial Tao of divinity was constantly being transmitted to Wu Qi, comparing it with everything Wu Qi knew, deepening their understanding of the heavenly Tao. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other orthodox immortals were solemnly listening to Wu Qi teach them the innate pure Yang universal scripture, a primordial scripture from the sovereign of myriad immortal alliance. At the same time, wisps of the divine flame of great tranquility kept flickering around them, injecting an enormous amount of natural energy into their bodies. They did not need to spend any effort to absorb the energy to improve their cultivation base, as all they needed to do was to comprehend the boundless magic Wu Qi taught them. Naturally, no one cared about that and no one would notice it. But Wu Qi was crazily plundering the natural energy in this boundless ocean of natural energy. It was like someone drinking a small mouthful of water from the Pacific Ocean. No one noticed what he was doing underground. There was still a month and a half before Wu Qi would participate in the ritual. In other words, with the 2,000-fold acceleration of time that Wu Qi could control, he had 3,000 months to cultivate in seclusion. 3,000 months, or 250 years. This was the main reason why Yu forbade any immortals from getting close to the area 10 billion miles around Yuxiong Plain without permission. As long as any immortal sneaked into Yuxiong Plain and entered the depths, he would be able to use the endless natural energy to cultivate as much as he wanted. However, the amount of natural energy under Yuxiong Plain was too much to count, and you had no way to monitor its flow. Therefore, to prevent any immortals from using the natural energy to strengthen themselves, you simply sealed off Yuxiong Plain. Unless it was an envoy of the celestial court like Liu Bang, he would kill any immortal who dared to approach Yuxiong Plain. 100 million miles below Yuxiong Plain, the concentration of natural energy and Pangu sacred energy had reached a level that almost drove Wu Qi crazy. Had he ever seen crystallized natural energy and Pangu sacred energy? The underground here was filled with such perverted existences. In the liquid spiritual energy sea, there were energy crystals of different sizes, tens of thousands of miles in radius. Some of them had been compressed and condensed to the extreme. The energy contained in them was so strong that the leaking energy waves could even distort the surrounding space. Only the supreme oracles of Yu had the privilege to enter the Yuxiong Plains at any time and absorb the natural energy and Pangu sacred energy here. All the major clans in Liangzhu had supreme oracles, so they always had many experts in their clans. This had also maintained the status and power of the Yu clan on Pangu continent. Now that Wu Qi was also a supreme priest and had been conferred the title of King of the East Sea Prefecture, even if he was discovered to be frantically plundering the spiritual energy underground, the outsiders would just turn a blind eye to it. As the divine flame of great tranquility slowly fused into their bodies, Supremacy 3 Flame, who was standing next to them, was surrounded by a green, glass-like flame. Supremacy 3 Flame was very talented when it came to playing with fire, and he had already begun to master the magical ability of this innate divine flame. In the future, Wu Qi's underhand sect would certainly have another expert in alchemy. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Li sat cross-legged on a purple crystal that measured more than 100,000 miles in diameter, their bodies crazily absorbing the natural energy around them like black holes. Meanwhile, 108 Kunwu swords formed the fiend-slaying sword formation to devour the surrounding natural energy, purifying it and injecting it directly into their bodies. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Li's divine souls were closely connected, and Wu Qi was constantly transmitting all the insights he had gained after stepping into the realm of primordial to Princess Zhang Li, consuming his own blood essence and divine soul to forcibly improve the realm and cultivation base of Princess Zhang Li's divine soul. At the bottom of Dark Ean's celestial tower, Wu Qi had opened up a herb garden that measured hundreds of thousands of miles in circumference. A few blood-draining celestial fiends were carefully taking care of the various herbs planted in it. From time to time, Princess Zhang Li would stop her cultivation and come to the herb garden to help. With the help of her divine power, the spirit herbs were growing very well, and the ingredients needed to concoct some basic life-prolonging pills were plentiful. In this way, the millions of soldiers of the East Sea no longer had to worry about their lifespans running out when they left Dark Ean's celestial tower. Even emissaries of the celestial court like Liu Bang were under Dayu's surveillance at all times. They could use the rich natural energy above ground to cultivate, but if they dared to sneak into the ground, they would immediately be violently suppressed by Dayu. With Wu Qi's efforts, his power was growing rapidly. In hundreds of huge halls, millions of soldiers of the East Sea were undergoing brutal training. With the cruel physical training and constant brainwashing, Wu Qi was confident that when these soldiers left Dark Ean's celestial tower and ended their 250-year training, they would be ready to die for him at any time. Among these soldiers, many had excellent aptitudes, and the cultivation technique of the human race was the fastest. In just a dozen years, some of them had broken through the realm of Panga Heaven, which shocked even Wu Qi. Suddenly, Wu Qi understood why Dayu could cultivate a large number of powerful soldiers and oracles in a short period of time when he needed them. If it were not for the fact that the lifespan of the human race limited this method of accelerating time, perhaps Dayu would have become a place where primordial immortals roamed, and gold immortals were as common as dogs. Would anyone care if there was a drop of water missing from the Pacific Ocean? Of course, although the number of soldiers in Wu Qi's Dark Ean celestial tower was slightly larger, which clan of Dayu did not secretly train more powerful private armies for themselves? Not to mention others, Gao alone had millions of soldiers under his command, all of whom had been approved by the human emperor. So, how did he train these millions of soldiers? Everyone was well aware of this. Lord Xianxing, Catfish, the Dragon King of the East Sea, and many other aquatic demons, as long as they had the potential to cultivate into true dragons, had all gathered around a clone. The clone was practicing the dragon transformation script, teaching them all the mystic arts of dragons. Ao Buzan was sitting lazily off to one side, cultivating on his own while giving them some advice from time to time. Every word he said was just right, awakening the hearts of these aquatic demons like the morning bell. Under the guidance of Wu Qi, and having inherited the complete primordial Tao of divinity, Princess Zhongli had a bright and smooth path in front of her. She only needed to spend a little time and stride down this path, and then she would be able to advance to the realm of primordial, which was the level of the ancient gods, so-called innate ancient gods. All she lacked was the accumulation of divine power, and that was what Wu Qi's cultivation technique was best at. On top of that, Wu Qi had the myriad harmonization grand magic, which not only allowed him to devour foreign objects to nourish himself, but could also reverse the cultivation technique and transfer all of his energy to Princess Zhongli. An enormous amount of energy essence and the enlightenment of the heavenly Tao were constantly injected into Princess Zhongli's body. Her level of understanding of the primordial Tao of divinity was steadily rising, and her understanding of the primordial Tao of divinity was getting deeper and deeper. The various mystic arts of the primordial Tao of divinity she mastered were also getting stronger and stronger. Inside Dark Ean's celestial tower, apart from the 2 blood-draining celestial gods, some of the other 16 blood-draining celestial gods had taken the form of Wu Qi, sitting cross-legged in various halls of the tower with solemn expressions, teaching Wu Qi the various scriptures of the primordial Tao of divinity to different targets. Wu Qi opened his interstitial world. Chaotic energy poured out wildly, plundering the energy crystals that were drifting and colliding with each other like mountains. Oh heavens, there were tens of thousands of miles of crystalline energy and Pangu sacred energy. Wu Qi's eyes turned green as he excitedly swallowed one energy crystal after another into his interstitial world. At the same time, he kept exercising the myriad harmonization grand magic to absorb the vast and endless energy around him. The cultivation techniques of the human race were easy to master, and with the help of the Supreme Tower, perhaps in just 3 to 5 days in the outside world, Dayu could cultivate a large number of gold immortals. It was no wonder Dayu could fight against the celestial court for so many years without falling. Even the human wave attack was enough to give the celestial court a headache. It took eons of time for a gold immortal to cultivate, but Dayu could cultivate gold immortal warriors and oracles like leeks in the field, harvesting them in just 3 to 5 days. The difference in their combat potential was too obvious. Lord Buddha's Great Light Indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture contained the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League, the Great Light Amitabha Universal Enlightenment. It was the divine ability that Lord Buddha had once used on the severely wounded Buddha Futu. It allowed him to inject his own cultivation base, magic power, and blood essence into the target's body. It was not enough to describe what Wu Qi was feeling now as a mouse falling into a rice barn. He produced Dark In's celestial tower and plundered the surrounding energy to his heart's content, but it did not reduce at all. All the disciples of Underhand sect, all the people around Wu Qi, and the million-strong army carefully selected from the East Sea province were hidden in Dark In's celestial tower by Wu Qi. As for the disciples of Underhand sect, the disciples of the human race were gathered in a great hall, listening to the teachings of various mystic arts, while the disciples of the demon race were being taught the mystic arts of the demon race. The shadowy figure had given Wu Qi the complete inheritance of Scroll of Stealing, which contained the natal divine abilities of all the great ancient demons, so it was appropriate to teach them to the disciples of the demon race. Some of the demon disciples Wu Qi had recruited actually had the faint bloodline of ancient demons. In just a dozen years, they had awakened their bloodline, and naturally, their cultivation bases had improved by leaps and bounds. The momentum of their rapid progress was astonishing. From time to time, Wu Qi would personally enlighten Lu Chengfeng, Yan Bugui, and those close to him, forcibly improving their cultivation bases. In just a few years, he had brought Lu Chengfeng, Yan Bugui, and others to the realm of heaven immortals, and after that, their cultivation bases improved by leaps and bounds. If it were not for the fact that Diyu was conservative and traditional, and only guarded Pangu continent as his territory, the celestial court would have been destroyed by Diyu a long time ago. The sticky liquid energy and Pangu's sacred energy rushed into Dark In's celestial tower, catching the millions of people in the tower off guard and drowning them in the liquid energy. Countless people were thrown and rolled around by the torrent of energy, and some even screamed for help. The Dark In's celestial tower was plunged into chaos in an instant. But soon, these people found out what exactly was pouring into the tower. Before the soldiers of East Sea Province could figure it out, Patriarch Jiang Yun, Lord Xianxing, Supremacy Three Flame, and the other immortals had already exclaimed and sat down cross-legged in ecstasy, entering into a deep state of cultivation. Chapter 8:11. After spending a month and a half cultivating in seclusion underground, Wu Qi returned to the surface alone to participate in the deadly heaven-worshipping ceremony, where Emperor Haozuan officially announced that he was conferred the title of King of East Sea Prefecture. The fact that he had single-handedly killed 7 primordial immortals had been confirmed, and both the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League had officially sent an official document to Diyu. Therefore, the promotion of Wu Qi was unanimously approved by all the civil and military officials in the imperial court. Except for King Baishan, whose whereabouts were unknown, no one objected to Wu Qi's promotion. The slightly interesting news was that Diyu, as usual, ignored the official documents sent by the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. After Liu Bang left the imperial palace, Emperor Haozuan rewarded 2 official scrolls made of rare materials, such as the silk of 10,000-year-old heavenly silkworms, to a chief eunuch. The chief eunuch, who was in charge of Emperor Haozuan's daily meals, happily made the 2 scrolls into a pair of fine socks. This was Diyu's attitude. After the protests from the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League, Diyu had returned to his original track, moving forward according to the old tradition. Wu Qi held a banquet in his palace, inviting Gao, King Yufeng, and a group of people close to him to drink for 3 days and 3 nights. After that, he went back to his secluded cultivation. The excuse he gave to the public was that he had just stepped into the realm of Supreme Oracle and needed to stabilize his cultivation base while studying some supreme mystic arts provided by the secret palace. It was a real excuse, for after learning that Wu Qi had broken through the realm of Supreme Oracle, the first master of the secret palace had given Wu Qi countless mystic arts, each of which was extremely exquisite and powerful. Meanwhile, Liu Bang stayed quietly in Changle Palace, drinking and making merry every day and never running around again. Wu Qi had assigned some soldiers to keep an eye on him in shifts. Just like that, the days went by. In a great hall about 100 miles long and wide in Dark Een Celestial Tower, the light curtain constructed by Princess Zhanglu, which was a combination of 49,000 ancient runes and primordial Tao of divinity, kept vibrating and producing dull, loud noises. Wu Qi was bare-chested, his hair disheveled as he laughed and waved his fists to clash with a silver halberd and a black knife that were thrusting toward him. The man was Lord Xianxing, who was holding a silver halberd that kept drawing dazzling silver rainbows in the air. After hundreds of years of hard cultivation, the mystic arts of dragons that Wu Qi had taught him, and the fact that Wu Qi had forcibly imbued him with his own blood essence, he had firmly stepped into the realm of first-tier gold immortal. Lord Xianxing's understanding of the laws of heavenly Tao was obviously not enough, but he was a body cultivator. As long as the strength of his fleshly body was improved, it was possible for him to break through the realm by force. This extreme method of cultivation would bring him a lot of trouble when he broke through the realm of primordial in the future, but it was undoubtedly the best choice for him to improve his overall strength quickly. The halberd in Lord Xianxing's hand was a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact that Wu Qi had forged for him. It was so powerful that it could split the sky with a single strike. After looting Buddha Futu and the 7 primordial experts, as well as Lu Bang and the others, Wu Qi had looted countless rare materials from Wu Qi. Then he found dozens of innate energies in the huge spirit cave beneath Yuxiong Plain, which he injected into Lord Xianxing's silver halberd. With that, he made it into a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact for the time being. Once Lord Xianxing broke through the realm, he could nourish the halberd with his blood essence and divine soul, and when the time was right, it would become a primordial divine artifact. The halberd let out a deep dragon roar as it thrust toward Wu Qi. Countless silver rainbows swept across Wu Qi like a storm. Like true Lord Gu, Lord Xianxing walked the path of extreme speed. But, unlike true Lord Gu Yi as a member of the dragons, his fleshly body was much stronger than true Lord Gu Yi's. Once he stepped into the realm of primordial, his physical strength would be at least 1,000 times stronger than true Lord Gu. This was the innate talent of the dragons, and no one could be blamed for it. Therefore, Lord Xianxing had true Lord Gu Yi's speed, but not his physical strength. Once he stepped into the realm of primordial, he would be even more terrifying than true Lord Gu. Even now, if Wu Qi did not use the rhino cloak, his speed would not be able to keep up with Lord Xianxing, and every blow from Lord Xianxing made Wu Qi's fists ache. The numbness and swelling feelings spread from his wrists to his elbows. Sweating profusely, Lord Xianxing laughed wildly as he attacked Wu Qi with all his might. What a great thing it was to have Wu Qi, a primordial expert, to fight with him every day. For primordial experts who stood high above the masses, it was impossible for those primordial experts in the world of 9 heavens to condescend to fight with their own disciples like this, not even their own personal disciples. Every move of a primordial expert contained the heavenly secret, so when Lord Xianxing fought Wu Qi head-on, each of Wu Qi's punches gave him a refreshing feeling. And he did not need to worry that he would hurt Wu Qi, for he could fight with all his might. Every blow he struck with all his strength, every blow used up all his understanding of the heavenly Tao, and every blow he struck out with all his strength, spirit, and energy. This was also one of the reasons why Lord Xianxing could make such rapid progress. With a primordial expert as his practice target, it would be embarrassing if he made slow progress. A series of deafening booms rang out as Lord Xianxing laughed wildly and unleashed another wave of 7,200 stabs. The dense beams of silver light turned into a sheet of silver light without the slightest gap, enveloping Wu Qi in it. With a serious face, Wu Qi met the attack with both fists. He successfully intercepted 7,125 of the attacks, but the remaining 75 attacks were beyond Wu Qi's speed limit and hit Wu Qi's body. Sparks flew in all directions. Ao Buzan, who was glaring at Wu Qi with a black knife in his hand, laughed wildly and swung it toward his lower body. "Damn it, Lao Tzu will stab you to death with this spear." Standing 23 feet tall and staring at a black dragon head, Ao Buzan, who had yet to fully transform into his human form, swung his specially made machete that was 32 feet long, which looked like a large door, and brought it down excitedly. It was a divine weapon that Wu Qi had crafted for him, and it was only a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact at the moment. When Ao Buzan, who was now a peak-level gold immortal, stepped into the primordial realm, as long as he worked hard to refine it with his own blood essence and divine soul, he would be able to upgrade it into a primordial divine weapon. However, out of Ao Buzan's bad taste, he strongly requested Wu Qi to craft a black spear for him. In this way, whenever he faced a female enemy, he could shout, "Lao Tzu will stab you to death with this spear," which would give Ao Buzan a strong sense of pleasure. However, Wu Qi did not satisfy Ao Buzan's bad taste. Gnashing his teeth, he crafted the black machete for Ao Buzan. Ao Buzan was a little resentful about this. Therefore, every time he fought with Wu Qi, he would attack Wu Qi without holding back, aiming at Wu Qi's crotch, or occasionally taking care of Wu Qi's face. That was because he wanted to slap Wu Qi's face into a big pancake, to get back at Ao Buzan for not being able to stab people to his heart's content. Despite being a peak-level gold immortal, Ao Buzan still could not completely transform into his human form. Although Ao Buzan did not seem to care about this, Wu Qi and others began to speculate about his origin. Everyone knew that the more ancient a divine beast's bloodline was, the harder it was to transform into a human form. However, even little Kay, who was raised by Princess Zhanglu, had transformed into a pretty girl, and only Ao Buzan, who had the highest cultivation base, still had a dragon head on his head. What exactly was his origin? Glaring at Ao Buzan, Wu Qi raised his leg and kicked the machete back. Then with his left hand he thrust out a palm thunder. 1,000-feet-long golden thunderbolt, accompanied by countless thunderbolts and flames of 5 elements, roared out and struck Ao Buzan, causing him to howl miserably and retreat in a sorry state. Even the most ordinary palm thunder had a terrible lethality in Wu Qi's hand. Just a casual strike of it contained all 5 elements, and the energies of 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, which gave it a great power. Ao Buzan had the cultivation base of a peak-level gold immortal, and the defense of his dragon scales was comparable to a supreme-grade gold immortal item. But still, Wu Qi's attack shattered his scales and sent his flesh flying in all directions. Ao Buzan was in so much pain that tears rolled down his cheeks. Then he swung his machete and slashed at Wu Qi's lower body. Disregarding the blood and flesh splattering from Xiang Ao's body, 2 handsome boys, who looked only 13 or 14 years old, rushed over and cheered in unison, "Dragon meat! The meat of an ancient divine dragon! It tastes so good!" They were the human incarnations of Goldhorn and Silverhorn, who had also stepped into the realm of first-tier gold immortals. But they had barely taken 3 steps when 2 young girls, who looked only 12 or 13 years old, grabbed their necks, pushed them to the ground and gave them a brutal beating. While beating the Goldhorn brothers, the 2 girls bellowed furiously, "You good for nothing! This meat is not fresh anymore. If you want to eat, you must find something fresh. If you want to eat, you must find something fresh." Ao Buzan, who was swinging his machete and slashing at Wu Qi, was so frightened that his hands went limp. Howling, he rushed out of the light screen. Goldhorn and Silverhorn exchanged a glance, then sprung to their feet and joined hands with the 2 girls to pounce on Xiang Ao. "Cut a leg for us, Ao Buzan!" Goldhorn roared at the top of his lungs. "In any case, you can regrow a leg with just 3 to 5 years of hard cultivation, so hurry up and cut a leg for us." Dragon pythons of fire and ice were an ancient species, the natural enemy of the ancient divine dragons. As a mischievous man, Ao Buzan was filled with bitterness when he saw the 4 Goldhorn brothers. He angrily roared and cursed. Then he rushed out of the light screen and disappeared without looking back. The Goldhorn brothers chased after him, determined to get a few pieces of meat from Ao Buzan, which were almost extinct now, so that they could feast on them to their heart's content. All of a sudden, a wild laughter was heard coming from the great hall next door. "Haha, I've finally concocted the 9 deaths and 9 lives white bone pill. It is a supreme-grade gold immortal pill that can prolong one's life by 36 periods. Patriarch Jiang Yun's laughter stopped abruptly. Yen Bugui, you bastard. Leave one for me and let me study it carefully. Why did you take all 108 spirit pills? What are you going to do with them? You bastard! You bastard! A loud rumble rang out as the wall next door suddenly collapsed. As Patriarch Jiang Yun was busy chasing after Yen Bugui, he did not have the time to put away his blazing pill cauldron. The violent alchemy flame destroyed the cauldron, causing a large part of the wall to collapse. Wu Qi breathed a long sigh, then flipped over and kicked Lord Xianxing away, causing him to hang on the wall like a painting. I have to think of a way to prolong the lives of Yen Bugui and the other scouting officers who are practicing the cultivation techniques of the human race. Calculating with his fingers, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, "Where can I find a primordial immortal who has committed the most heinous crimes to kill? There's no hurry. I can still cultivate for a little longer. It's only been 1,000 years, and it's only been half a year outside." Inside Wu Qi's dark celestial tower, the sound of explosions, collapses, screams, and wails could be heard incessantly. It was full of vitality and the joy of life. To continue cultivating in such an environment for 1,000 years, life was just too wonderful. Chapter 8:12. Time flowed like water. Another half a month had passed in the outside world, and the people in Dark Celestial Tower had been cultivating hard for 500 months, or more than 40 years. As usual, Wu Qi devoured the natural energy in the outside world, converted it into chaotic energy, refined it into the energy essence of an immortal cultivator through his fleshly body, and delivered it to his subordinates through the enlightenment technique. During these days, Wu Qi's cultivation base remained at the level of 9th-tier primordial immortal, but his foundation was much more stable than before, and his energy essence and bloodline were more than 100 times stronger. He had spent most of his energy on the people around him. If not for the fact that he had sacrificed his own energy essence to help these people, even though the time in this place had been sped up by 2,000 times, and there was an endless amount of natural energy to help them cultivate, how could Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others improve so quickly? After more than 40 years, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others all had the cultivation base of peak-level gold immortals, and their Tao hearts had also bloomed as Wu Qi preached to them day and night. This germination was the opportunity to enter the primordial great Tao, the gateway for them to step into the Tao realm from an ant. As long as they carefully nurtured this germination with their blood and sweat, they would one day step into the Tao realm. Ao Buzan, Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, Silver Feather, Lord Xianxing, his father Ao Guang, the Dragon King of the East Sea, Ao Kwa, the Dragon King of Qianzhang Lake, Ao Quan, the former leader of the aquatic clans on Myriad Immortals Planet, Little K, the phoenix raised by Princess Zhonglu, and Feng Tianling, the descendant of the fire phoenix whom Little K had seduced. These people were the most capable and closest demon cultivators under Wu Qi's command, and all of them had the hope of stepping into the realm of primordial. What surprised Wu Qi the most was that the rabbit demon Rabbit and monkey demon Yuan Qing of the Underhand sect that he'd casually taken in all those years ago had actually awakened their ancient bloodlines, and their cultivations improved the fastest amongst the numerous demon cultivators of the Underhand sect. Wu Qi gave them special attention for a period of time, preaching various cultivation manuals of primeval demons every day, causing them to catch up to the footsteps of Ao Buzan and the others. Among the many demon cultivators around Wu Qi, the one who gave him the biggest headache now was Catfish. Her cultivation base and realm were equal to that of Ao Buzan and others, and for some reason her divine strength was able to suppress Lord Xianxing to the point of suffocation. Among the demon cultivators around Wu Qi, only Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing, the descendant of the mighty ape, could barely suppress her in terms of physical strength. But when Catfish Flooddragon was the king of the mountain in the depths of Meng Mountains, she killed countless living beings every day and spent all her time devouring them. As a result, she was entangled with evil karma and was surrounded by boundless evils. Her true form was just a deep water black catfish, and she did not have any ancient bloodline. It was extremely difficult for her to transform into a human form, and coupled with the entanglement of evil karma, she still looked like a catfish until now. Through the Dharma eye of transmigration of the Buddhist League, which Wu Qi had cultivated with the great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture, he could see that catfish flood dragon was shrouded in a blood-red light and shrouded in black mist. Obviously, she had eaten too many things that she should not have eaten over the years. It was like a heavy shell wrapped around her, preventing the germination of a primordial immortal from sprouting. Not only did it delay her transformation into a human form, it also made it very difficult for her to break through to the primordial immortal realm in the future. For now, she could only do as Wu Qi had planned, find a few primordial immortals who had committed the most heinous crimes and secretly kill them, then let catfish flood dragon plunder a great deal of virtue of heaven and earth from them. With the virtue, she could wash away the evil karma around her, freeing her from these troubles. Apart from these demon cultivators, the senior immortals around Wu Qi were Patriarch Jiang Yun, Patriarch Qing Wu, Patriarch Bai Xia, Patriarch Qing Xian, Patriarch Qing Shen, and Patriarch Qing Yi. They were the 6 old immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. With the help of Wu Qi, their cultivation bases had reached the same level as Ao Buzan and the others. In addition to that, Lu Qingfeng and Lu Tsuyuan, the 2 brothers, had been working hard in their cultivation base over the years. Together with Wu Qi's special help, they had also reached the point where they were just one step away from the realm of primordial immortal. There was also Supremacy 3 Flame, who was Wu Qi's friend in times of adversity. Over the years, he had been handling the affairs of Underhand sect for Wu Qi. He stayed in Mount Picking Star and basically never left the sect. All he did was carefully train and manage Wu Qi's disciples. Wu Qi was very grateful to him, so he spent a lot of time and effort on Supremacy 3 Flame and Shui Mei. Now, Supremacy 3 Flame had successfully attained the enlightenment of the realm of primordial immortal, and his technique of controlling fire with the divine flame of great tranquility was only inferior to the sovereign of myriad immortal alliance. The little girl, Shui Mei, was so smart that she had reached this critical level. With just a little push, she would be able to step into the realm of primordial immortal. As for the disciples of Luo clan whom Wu Qi took in on a whim, Luo Lu, Luo Hao, Luo Shui, Luo Ling, and Luo Yu were the most talented among them, especially the 3 sisters. If it were not for their outstanding talents, Wu Qi would not have taken them as his disciples. After over 1,000 years of enlightenment and constant explanation of the essence of the Great Tao, they had all successfully stepped into the realm of primordial. However, it was too difficult for a gold immortal to break through the realm of primordial immortal. In addition to the huge demand for natural energy, it also required some kind of enlightenment and inspiration. For now, Wu Qi also needed to find a few primordial immortals who had committed heinous crimes and kill them, then use the virtue of heaven and earth to forcibly push these friends, family, and disciples into the realm of primordial. Only a freak like Wu Qi could do this. How could other primordial immortals treat their disciples, family, and friends in this way? 4 ordinary primordial immortals, a drop of blood essence and energy essence was more important than their lives. It was impossible for them to enlighten their disciples and forcibly improve their cultivation bases. It was a good thing that some primordial immortals who came from the evil path did not plunder the blood essence and energy essence of their disciples, but it was absolutely impossible for them to donate their own blood essence and energy essence to outsiders. Every drop of a primordial immortal's blood essence and energy essence was extremely precious and related to their very foundation. Who else could do this except for a freak like Wu Qi, who could devour foreign objects without limit and transform them into blood essence and energy essence? Immortals were selfish, and only Wu Qi could be so generous. As for the essence of the Great Tao, the essence of the Great Tao that every primordial immortal comprehended was comprehended by them at the critical moment of life and death, after spending countless hours of hard work. If one wanted to hear a word or half of the true heavenly Tao from their mouths, it would depend on what one had to exchange for it. It was better for personal disciples. Generally speaking, those primordial immortals would give lectures for 3 days or 6 hours every period, depending on the generosity of the primordial immortals. As for how much a personal disciple could benefit from the lectures, it would depend on his own ability of comprehension. No primordial immortal would use his blood-draining celestial fiend clone to teach his friends, family, and disciples all kinds of heavenly Tao day and night like Wu Qi, forcing them to comprehend the endless mysteries in it. As for those in-name disciples and outer disciples, if one wanted to get a word or half of a primordial immortal's advice, it would depend on how many natural treasures they offered as tribute. If they offered a lot, 1 or 2 words of advice would be enough for them to comprehend for a few periods. If they offered too little, they might even be scolded. Are you purposely trying to embarrass me with such a small amount of gifts? It was because Wu Qi was willing to spend so much and cultivate the people around him at all costs that the grand occasion of today could come about. With a total of 29 people who had the potential to break through the realm of primordial, and thousands of subordinates whose cultivation bases had reached the realm of gold immortals, Wu Qi was now in a state of happiness and distress. I have to find a few primordial immortals who have committed the most heinous crimes and kill them. Otherwise, it will be difficult for all of you to break through the realm of primordial in a short time. Sitting cross-legged on a hassock, Wu Qi gritted his teeth as he looked at the 29 friends and relatives who had the potential to break through the realm of primordial. Everyone was staring at Wu Qi with their bright eyes, filled with passion, affection, and friendship. Their pure and warm feelings were like strong wine, lingering in the air between them. Even Audiobook, who was usually the most shameless fellow, now looked at Wu Qi with a hint of admiration and respect in his eyes. Everyone knew that if it were not for Wu Qi, they might not have had the opportunity today even after thousands of reincarnations, let alone Audiobook, who had been made into a storage ring and would never be able to make a name for himself. It was Wu Qi who had given them such an opportunity, and they finally had the chance to stand at the top of all living beings. Sitting next to Wu Qi was Princess Zhonglu, who was clad in a black palace dress and had long hair like Wu Qi. With her head down, she was fiddling with 3 phoenix feathers that she had pulled out from little K's tail, and was inscribing primordial divine runes into the feathers. She was going to use little K's tail, Audiobook's dragon whiskers, the scales of gold horn and silver horn, and Rabbit Xiaobai's long hair to make a fun magical treasure. Princess Zhonglu had successfully broken through the realm of primordial immortals without any stagnation. She carried the bloodline of the primordial heaven god and was the manifestation of the great Tao of heaven and earth. A breakthrough was a breakthrough, and there was not even a heavenly tribulation. She had dismantled the original Five Thunders immortal zither and was going to use it on this new magical treasure. It was a little embarrassing for a primordial immortal to use a zither that was only a heaven immortal item. Upon hearing Wu Qi's plan, Princess Zhonglu lowered her head and sighed. We have to find a suitable target. The 7 primordial immortals you killed last time have been guarding the mortal world all year round, and they have accumulated a lot of virtues. They have avoided the punishment of the heavenly Tao with virtues, so it's no good to kill them. Where can we find someone like the sovereign who has committed a heinous crime to kill us? The group of people looked at each other with a distressed expression. Wu Qi had a strong army around him now, but he was still one step away from being reborn. If all these people could break through the realm of primordial, Wu Qi's power would undergo a tremendous change, and many things could be carried out slowly. Just one step away. Wu Qi gritted his teeth and murmured in a low voice, just one step away. As long as all of you become primordial immortals. When the 6 states unite, gather all those freaks together, and spend some time to raise them all to the level of gold immortals, the world will be lively. With a sigh, Wu Qi shook his head, a little vexed. Where could he find a primordial immortal who had committed a heinous crime? Just as the crowd was racking their brains for a solution, they moved at the same time and looked up with ferocious faces. About 100 million miles above them, outside the 2 palaces that Emperor Haozuan had given to Wu Qi, King Baishan was approaching cautiously under the cover of night with a large group of ferocious-looking generals and thousands of black-robed oracles. Judging from King Baishan's ferocious and violent expression, he should not be here to drink and chat with Wu Qi. Chapter 8:13. Hee hee. Wu Qi's sinister laughter rang out in the dimly lit hall. His eyes shone with a strange gleam. Under the gaze of his chaotic divine eyes, the thick fire of karma around the dozen or so cloaked men around King Baishan was so eye-catching that they looked like a dozen torches, and the crimson glow of the fire of karma was so tempting. The fire of karma was the condensation of too much karma, a flame ignited by all kinds of filthy thoughts in people's hearts. Buddhism called it the red lotus karma fire, and it was the filthiest and most powerful invisible flame in the world. Serious immortal and Buddhist cultivators would avoid this kind of fire of karma, as even the slightest touch of it would cause their golden bodies to fall into the cycle of samsara. The fire of karma around the men around King Baishan soared hundreds of feet high. Clearly, they were not immortal or Buddhist cultivators. Even fiend immortals and ghost immortals dared not touch this terrible flame, so they should be pure human beings. How many sins did they have to commit to accumulate so much karma and ignite such a blazing fire of karma? Wu Qi marveled. If he killed them, how many virtues of heaven and earth could he get? He had no idea how many sins they had committed, how many people they had killed, and how many laws of the heavenly Tao they had violated. But this was really a virtue that came knocking on his door, and it would be disrespectful to refuse it. Laughing loudly, Wu Qi opened his mouth and sprayed out a beam of green light, from which 360 miniature Kunwu swords flew out. These swords were only 1/3 the size of the original Kunwu swords, and they were the largest number that Wu Qi could produce now. The fact that he could produce 360 swords that were slightly smaller but fully functional would not affect Wu Qi's overall strength. If he used them to lay out the fiend-slaying sword formation, its power would be about twice that of a formation laid out by 108 Kunwu swords. After handing the Kunwu swords to 12 prudent men, including Patriarch Jiang Yun, Wu Qi ordered, "Apart from you, choose 348 prudent men who are proficient in formations and prepare to lay out the fiend-slaying sword formation. Since King Baishan is here, don't let him go. The people around him might be where your fortuitous encounters lie." The eyes of Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others brightened. They quickly took over the Kunwu swords handed over by Wu Qi and left the hall. Then, Wu Qi gave Ao Buzan and the other demon cultivators a look and said with a cold grin, "Come with me, let's see what King Baishan wants to do first." Frowning, Wu Qi murmured in surprise, "Didn't they say he was imprisoned by Emperor Haozuan in Deyu's imperial prison and will never come out? His title is going to be inherited by Deyu's royal family. Why did he come here to make trouble?" Princess Zhang carefully put the 3 phoenix feathers in her hand into her sleeve. She yawned lazily and said lazily, "Who cares how he came out? Let's kill him first, then kill all the direct descendants of King Baishan's bloodline, and then find out who released him from the clan prison without permission." A 5-colored divine ray burst out of the top of Princess Zhang Li's head, in which 3 shrines, each about 10 feet tall and inlaid with gold and jade, hovered. Over the past 1,000 years, with the help of Wu Qi, Princess Zhang had formed the first golden body of the god of Scourge, and with the help of Wu Qi, she had also formed the golden body of the god of Plague and the golden body of the god of Thunder. Once the golden body of the god of Plague was activated, plagues would be everywhere within millions of miles, and all the living beings whose cultivation bases were lower than Princess Zhang would not be able to escape. If the golden body of the god of Plague was used to cast a divine spell on one person, the terrible plague curse would be a headache even for those whose cultivation bases were several levels higher than Princess Zhang. As for the golden body of the god of Thunder, there was nothing special about it. But once it was activated, the area within millions of miles would be turned into an absolute realm of thunder and lightning, with nothing but thunder and lightning. If she focused all her divine power to unleash the ancient void-shattering thunder, it would be a supreme divine ability that could shatter the primordial void. Even the Pangu heaven-creating thunder, which the great Saint Pangu used to create this world, was derived from the ancient void-shattering thunder, which showed how powerful this divine ability of Princess Zhang was. In terms of physical strength, Princess Zhang was far inferior to Wu Qi, and in terms of unpredictable and powerful divine abilities, Wu Qi was no match for Princess Zhang. The two of them left Dark Ean's celestial tower hand in hand, followed by Ao Buzan, Lord Xianxing, and other demon cultivators who were impatient to study the sword formation. Huang Liang also came with a group of generals of the East Sea, who had been completely brainwashed and loyal to Wu Qi in the past 1,000 years. The cultivation techniques of the human race were the fastest to master. Over the past 1,000 years, the East Sea had accumulated tens of thousands of generals with the cultivation bases of the second Panga Heaven. And now, hundreds of generals with the cultivation bases of the 8 and 9 stars of the second Panga Heaven had followed them. All of them were armed to the teeth, using the supreme-grade armors and weapons that Wu Qi had personally crafted for them over the years, which were top-notch in both offense and defense. Wu Qi had not slept or rested for more than 1,000 years. He had not only helped them in their cultivation, but also infused them with a lot of blood essence and energy essence, crafted all kinds of weapons and armors for them, and helped Patriarch Jiang Yun concoct pills and draw talismans. If he did not have 18 blood-draining celestial fiends, Wu Qi would have died of exhaustion long ago. He had to take care of more than 1 million people. Even if he was only responsible for a small portion of the most elite people, the workload was still too much. But now, as he looked at his subordinates in bright armors and towering murderous auras behind him, Wu Qi was filled with a heroic spirit. He threw his head back and roared with laughter, then put his arm around Princess Zhang Li's waist and strode out with them. With the help of Princess Zhang Li's magical art, it took them only the span of 2 or 3 breaths of time to reach the surface of the natural energy ocean. On the roof of the tallest main hall, Wu Qi and his company hid their figures and watched quietly as King Baishan and his men carefully sneaked in from a distance. Under the night sky, King Baishan's army of more than 20,000 generals was divided into more than 2,000 squads, cautiously approaching the core of Wu Qi's palaces from all directions. Their movements were as smooth as flowing water, and in just a few leaps, they had closed the distance of dozens of miles. The 2 palaces given to Wu Qi by Emperor Haozuan covered an area of hundreds of miles, and they were given to him together with ordinary guards, maids, and a large number of eunuchs. Wu Qi was a master who was easy to serve, and he usually spent most of his time in seclusion. As a result, the servants never saw Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu. Now that it was late at night, the maids and eunuchs had gone to bed, and only the guards on night duty were still wandering around carelessly. After all, Wu Qi's foundation was still shallow, and he did not have many relatives or children, and there were no important things stored in those palaces. So, these guards were not under any pressure, and even if they were patrolling at night, it was just for show. Not to mention that there were no thieves in Liangzhu. Even if there were, they would not be able to steal anything of value, and they would not be able to hurt anyone important. But King Baishan's generals did not think so. They invaded Wu Qi's palaces like quicksilver, killing all the living things in their path. Whether it was the guards on duty, the maids and eunuchs who had gone to bed, or the tamed birds and beasts used for night patrols, these formidable generals killed them all. Not even a chicken or a dog was spared. Wu Qi pursed his lips. Do I have such a big grudge against him? As Wu Qi and his company possessed a profound cultivation base, they could see every single movement of those people in the dark night. Seeing a general with the cultivation base of the 7 stars realm of the second Panga Heaven crush a cricket that jumped out of the grass with 1 foot, Wu Qi could not help but complain bitterly. Not only did you not spare a chicken or a dog, but you even want to kill all the insects? How much do you hate yourself? The group of people were left speechless. They watched as a few intruders flew up the trees and strangled all the birds in the nests, regardless of their size. Even the eggs were crushed into a paste. Tu Xiaobai, who had the best temper among them, was so angry that she waved her little fists. The young girl that Tu Xiaobai had transformed into was just like her name, petite and adorable to the extreme. She was only as tall as an ordinary person's waist. Due to her rabbit nature, Tu Xiaobai was usually gentle and kind, and was the least willing to fight with others. But when she saw that these people did not even spare the birds' eggs, she could not help but say angrily, "Master, these people deserve to die 1,000 times for their crimes." Princess Zhang Lu raised her chin and said coldly, "They really deserve to die." Let's teach them a lesson first. Gently waving her hands in the air, Princess Zhonglu unleashed her divine power soundlessly. She had already locked onto the 20,000 invaders with her divine soul. She did not attack these generals. Instead, she followed a mysterious guiding force and directly found these people's blood relatives in this life. There were more than 20,000 high-ranking military officers, and each of them had a huge family backing them. Some of them had thousands of people in their families. Grinning coldly, Princess Zhonglu drew these people's energy into a gray net that ordinary people could not see. The golden body of the god of plagues hovering over her head gently blew out a puff of gray air, and all the relatives of these 20,000 generals were infected with all kinds of strange plagues and poisons at the same time. Watching Princess Zhonglu do this, Wu Qi could not help but be amazed by her attainment in divine magic. This kind of meticulous means of controlling the life and death of others was something that even Wu Qi had not mastered yet. This kind of terrible power that could silently and invisibly destroy an entire family made Wu Qi a little more wary of those gods he might encounter in the future. King Baishan was accompanied by thousands of black-robed oracles, who were also divided into nearly 1,000 squads and followed silently behind the invaders. They kept throwing numerous bone talismans, spirit bones, banners, and formation discs in all directions, quickly laying out the 10 Ultimate Formation, which was specially used by the Directorate of Celestials to trap and kill powerful enemies, with Wu Qi's 2 palaces as the core. The 10 Ultimate Formation could sever heaven, earth, gods, immortals, Buddhas, fiends, ghosts, demons, spirits, and humans. It could fuse all the ruthless energies between heaven and earth and wipe out all life. As these oracles moved, a faint black mist rose from the ground. Wherever it passed, all the flowers, plants, and trees withered and decayed, and all the houses in the palaces collapsed and decayed. The place shrouded by the black mist turned into a lifeless, withered land. What kind of hatred do you have? Didn't I just kill 2 of your sons? Wu Qi frowned and sighed. Get into formation. The 300 gold immortals selected by Patriarch Jiang Yun had already come behind King Baishan and the others with Kunwo swords in hand. They formed a circle with a diameter of 1,000 miles, and as Wu Qi gave a soft cry, they unleashed their swords at the same time. Invisible sword beams shot into the void and slowly drew in the power of heaven and earth in the surroundings to form the fiend-slaying sword formation. A huge iron plate was quietly appearing in front of King Baishan, who was charging forward angrily. Chapter 8:14. Standing on the top of the palace, Wu Qi watched quietly as King Baishan's men slaughtered wantonly in his territory. Kilkilk. These servants and guards are all the people who used to live in this palace, and if you kill them all, Wu Qi will bring more of his own men from the East Sea and plant them here. Even the original palaces were built in the style of Diyu, and Wu Qi thought they were a little too ugly. The dark mist stirred up by the 10 Ultimate Formation had destroyed all these palaces, and Wu Qi could rebuild a batch of palaces and pavilions according to his own will. As for the flowers and trees, it was not a big deal. With the infinite natural energy in Yuxiong Plain, he could easily restore them to their original appearance. Moreover, the replanted trees could also form a formation with the rebuilt palaces, and they would not be infiltrated as easily as they were today. After all, this was only a property Emperor Haozuan gave to his people, and the various facilities here were not enough to satisfy Wu Qi's discerning eyes. It was better to destroy them all, as he could rearrange everything. The newly built palaces and gardens would not be as free as they were today. Even if a 9th-tier primordial immortal dared to sneak in, he would have to pay with his life. With his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi sighed softly and suddenly let out a long roar as he watched the 20,000 soldiers brought by King Baishan approach. As Wu Qi's roar echoed out, Ao Buzan, who was standing behind Wu Qi, let out a strange cry. Standing 20 feet tall, Ao Buzan swung his black machete and roared, "Who are you, thieves? How dare you come to my place in the middle of the night with evil intentions? Eat my spear!" Ao Buzan leaped into the air and swung his machete at an invading general 2 or 3 miles away, who was clad in black armor and breaking the neck of the last night guard. "Eat my spear!" The general instinctively grabbed a round shield from his back and placed it in front of him. The most lethal part of a spear was nothing more than stabbing and stabbing. With the round shield protecting the vital parts of his upper body, the general was confident that he could block Ao Buzan's fatal spear. With a cracking sound, Ao Buzan hacked the general, who had just stepped into the realm of second Panga heaven, into two halves. It came down from the top of his head and came out from the bottom of his crotch. Chi-Chi's entire body, along with his armor and shield, was cut into two pieces. His internal organs and blood splattered all over the ground. Ao Buzan trod on a watery cloud and soared into the sky complacently. He let out a strange laugh and said, "Idiot, Lao Tzu said one spear, so you should just block one spear?" Behind Wu Qi, Yuan Qing, who had the bloodline of a mighty ape, transformed into a yellow-skinned young man about 10 feet tall. Though skinny, his bones were strong and his eyes were bright. Seeing that Ao Buzan had succeeded, Yuan Qing let out a shrill cry and leaped into the air, waving a large golden stick that Wu Qi had specially crafted for him and spitting flames from time to time. "Eat my spear, you little rascal! I'll poke your gallbladder!" Yuan Qing had been led astray by Ao Buzan. He had been completely led astray by Ao Buzan. The cudgel, as thick as a big bowl, whipped up a gust of wind and pierced toward the gallbladder of the leading black-armored warrior. Just as the warrior was about to block it with his saber, Yuan Qing suddenly changed his move. The heavy cudgel slammed heavily on the warrior's ribs with a swoosh, like a python turning over its body. Yuan Qing's stick was not heavy, but it was made by Wu Qi from a piece of heavy fire elemental metal that had been refined and tempered for countless years on a neutron star in outer heavenly realms. It was a neutron star material, so weight and the like were meaningless. Wu Qi had set up many formations on the stick to reduce its weight. Usually, when Yuan Qing swung the stick, it weighed only about 5,000 kilograms. But when it hit a human, the formations on the stick dissipated immediately, and all the weight of the stick blasted out. With a crisp sound, the man's armor and half of his body disintegrated into the tiniest energy particles, which then turned into countless shining specks of light that shot out in all directions. Yuan Qing laughed strangely and swung his staff like a tornado, beating the other 8 or 9 heavily armored warriors into a sorry state. Their swords, spears, swords, halberds, and all sorts of other weapons were smashed into smithereens by Yuan Qing's heavy staff. In the blink of an eye, 8 or 9 burly men had been beaten until their bodies burst open and they died. Whether it was in terms of cultivation base, strength, speed, or technique, these men were far inferior to Yuan Qing. When Ao Buzan saw that Yuan Qing had killed so many people with ease, he snorted angrily and swung his blade at the dozen black-armored men who were leaping at him. As a peak-level gold immortal and a member of the primordial dragons, Ao Buzan's pure physical strength had reached the limit below the realm of primordial immortals. As he swung the blade, the void in front of it cracked open. The dozen black-armored men howled miserably as their weapons and armors were cut in half by Ao Buzan. When Yuan Qing saw that Ao Buzan had killed a few more men than him, he roared and swung his stick at the 20-odd black-armored men who were charging at him. A series of egg-cracking noises rang out as Yuan Qing smashed the 20-odd black-armored men like eggs, sending their bodies flying thousands of feet away in all directions. Frowning, Lord Xianxing stood next to Wu Qi, shaking his head and saying, "Useless chickens and stray dogs." He gave Wu Qi a sideways glance and said with a teasing smile, "In terms of cultivation base, a peak-level gold immortal bullies a poor worm in the 1-star realm of the second Panga heaven. In terms of equipment, a future primordial immortal artifact bullies an ordinary artifact. In terms of bloodline, the bloodline of an ancient divine beast bullies a mortal." Wu Qi stretched out a finger and wagged it casually, then said shamelessly, "You can't say it like that. I've admitted the first 2 points, I did bully them. But the last point is that human beings are formed from the bloodline of hundreds of divine beasts and birds in the world, and they also have half of the bloodline of the great Saint Pangu. Although their strength is not as good as Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing, But, well, human beings are more balanced, aren't they? Lord Xianxing blinked his eyes and opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he could not utter a single word. Wuqi was right. Human beings were indeed a race with balanced development, and they had their own advantages over any ancient bloodline. But how did one look at this advantage? In a battlefield, it depended on the strength of brute force. In this regard, human beings were indeed not as good as the bloodline of the dragons and the primordial divine apes. Amidst the sound of bones and flesh being broken, Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing killed hundreds of black-armored men in a frenzy. Of the more than 20,000 generals brought by King Baishan, there were only a dozen of them who had reached the peak of the 9 stars realm of the second Panga heaven and could fight against Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing. Now, they were guarding King Baishan and had no intention of attacking. King Baishan stood on a hillside a few miles away, looking at them coldly. Wu Qi had asked Princess Zhangli to dispel the mist that had concealed them. Looking at each other from a distance of several miles, Wu Qi suddenly laughed. He cupped his fist and said, "Your Highness, how have you been after 1,000 years?" Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, King Baishan could not help but laugh. 1,000 years? Do you think I'm a fool? 1,000 years? King Baishan suddenly sucked in a cold breath. He stared blankly at Wu Qi for a while, and then remembered that Wu Qi had obtained a supreme tower that could control the flow of time from the secret vault of the Directorate of Celestials. With Wu Qi's cultivation base having broken through the realm of Supreme Oracle, it was possible for him to accelerate time by thousands of times. He had been imprisoned in the imperial prison by Emperor Haozuan for more than half a year, and Wu Qi had spent 1,000 years here. Looking at the generals of the East Sea standing behind Wu Qi, King Baishan took a few steps back reflexively. Each and every one of them had the cultivation base of the late or even the peak of the second Panga heaven. Wu Qi looked at King Baishan and sneered. He waved his hand and gave a low cry. Lord Xianxing pulled out his silver dragon halberd and rushed out, while Catfish Flood Dragon waved the mountain-sized hammer Wu Qi had forged for her, while the rest of the demon cultivators ran out with their weapons in their hands. Especially Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather. Their lower bodies remained human, but their upper bodies had returned to the form of dragon pythons. They opened their mouths and inhaled the enemies around them. Large groups of black-armored men howled miserably as they were sucked into their mouths and swallowed in the blink of an eye. Huang Liang gave a soft cry. Hundreds of generals of the East Sea under his lead drew their weapons and followed Huang Liang's lead, forming the East Sea wave-folding formation specially designed for them by Wu Qi. Like an endless tide, they rushed out. Bringing with them the terrible aura of a charging army, they charged into the army of King Baishan's subordinates like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep. Wherever they passed, blood and flesh flew in all directions, and broken limbs were thrown all over the ground. King Baishan watched coldly as a large number of his subordinates were killed, as if they were not the generals of the second Panga heaven, but pawns that could be discarded at will. There was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, as if he could not wait for all his subordinates to be killed. Wu Qi could not help but be a little surprised. Even if King Baishan was one of the most authoritative princes in Diyu, how many troops could he have? How many generals of the second Panga heaven could he have to trample on? Especially in his current situation, when he had just escaped from the imperial prison, how many loyal generals were still willing to die for him? How could he just let the last batch of generals who might be loyal to him die like this? Just as Wu Qi was wondering, King Baishan raised his hand and waved. The dozen men around him, whose bodies were shrouded in hellfire like torches, chuckled in a deep voice. Their faces were hidden under their cloaks, and no one could see their faces clearly. They chanted a spell in a low voice, and a great plume of black smoke surged out of the 10-terminal formation, turning into countless pitch-black pythons and rushing towards the men in the battle. Wu Qi was furious. This was a spell for the sacrifice of flesh and blood. King Baishan did not expect these generals to pose much of a threat to him. His plan was to use them as sacrifices, so he did not care how many of them Wu Qi and others killed. Princess Zhanglu reacted quickly. She unleashed a great sheet of 5-colored divine light, which enveloped Ao Buzan and others at the same time. Wherever the flame went, the black fog and pythons dared not come close. Wu Qi shouted a few times, and Ao Buzan and others hurriedly retreated to Wu Qi's side. The black smoke enveloped more than 20,000 generals brought by King Baishan, who seemed to have lost their minds and just let the smoke engulf them. The sound of bones and flesh being chewed rang out incessantly, accompanied by a heart-trembling sound. A beam of black light descended from the sky, and in the next moment, a fiend god about a mile tall and made entirely of white bones appeared silently in front of Wu Qi. This was not the projection of Lei Meng, the fiend god worshipped by Wu Qi. Instead, under the infinite temptation of more than 20,000 gold immortal sacrifices, this fiend god had chosen to descend in his true form. The black cloaks of the dozen or so black-robed men around King Baishan burned at the same time, gradually revealing their figures. 2 low-grade Supreme Oracles and 13 peak-level Sun Oracles. Chapter 8:15. There were 2 low-level Supreme Oracles. Wu Qi saw a pattern of a black Supreme Tower embroidered on their sleeves, which indicated that they had just stepped into this realm. But they were, after all, Supreme Oracles, who had the overall strength to fight against primordial immortals. They were existences that he had to deal with carefully. As for the 13 peak-level Sun Oracles, Wu Qi shook his head indifferently. A peak-level Sun Realm cultivator was merely a peak-level gold immortal, and Wu Qi could easily find any cultivator of this level around him now. He could easily crush them. But the problem was the fiend god hovering in front of him. Hundreds of tattered black strips of cloth were wrapped around his body. As the night breeze blew past him, the strips of cloth wriggled like venomous snakes, letting out shrill ghost howls from time to time. His upper body was 70 to 80% similar to a human skeleton, except that he had a few more vertebrae and ribs, and 3 sharp black horns on his skull. However, the lower half of his body, which was below his pelvis, was a mass of thick black gas. Countless twisted human faces could be seen in the black gas. Sharp and shrill howls pierced through the clouds, making people's eardrums hurt. It was as if their souls were about to be sucked out of their bodies. The fiend god's cultivation base was extremely frightening, and the attribute of his power was extremely bizarre. Even with the all-encompassing records in the scroll of stealing, Wu Qi could not tell what type of death energy this fiend god possessed. His cultivation base was clearly stronger than Wu Qi's, and Wu Qi could vaguely see the upper limit of his power, just like a man hovering in the sky could vaguely see the edge of the ocean. But Wu Qi reckoned that he was not his match for the time being. Only by trapping him with the fiend's slaying sword formation and gradually whittling away at his essence could he kill him. If Wu Qi were to fight him with only his own cultivation base, it would be difficult for him to resist him. The 2 Supreme Oracles were easy to deal with, and Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu would definitely give them a hard time if they joined forces. However, the skeleton would not show any mercy to Wu Qi and his wife. This was the biggest problem. After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi raised his right hand and waved it. The natural phenomena medallion flew up along with tens of thousands of beams of light. Large clouds of smoke spurted out and condensed into a small world above Wu Qi, trapping the fiend god in it. Muffled explosions could be heard from time to time in the void as the fiend celestial struggled and roared in the small world. The natural phenomenon medallion could only trap him temporarily and could not destroy him directly. Lei Meng, Wu Qi whispered to Princess Zhonglu. Princess Zhonglu nodded. She performed an incantation gesture with both hands and recited a few incantations in a low voice. A bolt of lightning came whistling down from the void, and Lei Meng's 100-mile-tall projection clone immediately appeared in front of Wu Qi. Lei Meng patted his belly, looked curiously at Wu Qi, and said with a smile, "Do you have any good offerings this time?" "Well, I'm very satisfied with what you have offered the last 2 times. Lei Meng glanced at Wu Qi with the lightning in his eyes, then cried out in shock. "My little one, how did your strength grow so fast? You really surprised me. Of the 14,597 people who have worshipped me, your cultivation base has grown the fastest." Smiling, Wu Qi pointed in King Baishan's direction and said, "Lei Meng, help me hold off King Baishan and those around him. When I'm done with the skeleton he summoned, I'll join hands with you to kill them. The bodies and souls of those two supreme oracles are yours, and I only want the virtues that will fall after I kill them." Lei Meng's eyes shone brightly as he fixed his eyes on King Baishan and those around him, whose faces were a little unsightly. After hesitating for a while, he muttered, "It's not fat enough. As you know, the souls of supreme oracles are stronger than those of mortals, but there's a limit to their strength. I've eaten a supreme oracle once, and his bone marrow was all dried up, and I couldn't even squeeze out a drop of blood from his body. So, it's not good for me." Wu Qi held up 2 fingers and promised, "Help me hold them off, and I'll find 2 primordial immortals as my offerings. Of course, you'll have to help me as well." Lei Meng stared at Wu Qi in astonishment. There were so many oracles and powerful clans in Diyu, and there were some who dared to offer primordial immortals as offerings. But they were all saint emperors who had swept through the world in ancient times. How many years had it been since Lei Meng heard such a bold statement? Offering primordial immortals as offerings? Saliva mixed with electric plasma dripped from the corner of Lei Meng's mouth as he nodded and said, "Just hold them off, right? Leave it to me." With a strange laugh, Lei Meng glanced at the small world Wu Qi had trapped with the natural phenomena medallion, wanting to see who Wu Qi was going to deal with. But he shuddered and looked at King Baishan in horror. "Do you have to fight so desperately? I can't believe you've summoned Gui Yu's true form. Hee, interesting it looks like this time." Lei Meng muttered in a low voice, and then a dull thunderclap rang out in the sky. He stared at Wu Qi and said, "I'll give you some benefits this time. Just kill Gui Yu, and leave everything outside to me. I'll give you 10 days. If you can kill Gui Yu, you'll have to give me his ghost head. Haha." As Lei Meng laughed, a plume of sticky, pale purple electric plasma that looked like molten lava slowly poured down from an invisible hole in the sky and injected into his body. As more and more electric plasma was injected into his body became shorter and shorter, and eventually he was about the same height as an ordinary man. But he was surrounded by endless thunderclouds, and his whole body was immersed in a sea of electric plasma that was as warm as jade. A terrible pressure of thunder came from him, forcing Wu Qi and Princess Zhangli to take a step back. Lei Meng's true form had come to Pangu continent from the world he came from. Wu Qi and Princess Zhangli clearly sensed the rejection of the laws of the heavenly Tao to him. A powerful force of repulsion was applied to Lei Meng, causing his true form to flicker from time to time like a reflection in the water, as if he would be forcibly expelled from the world at any time. Wu Qi looked up at the sky. The dark mist of the 10 Ultimate Formation pervaded the void, and the fiend-slaying sword formation isolated the world from the outside world. This place had become a world of its own. Fortunately, Lei Meng did not suffer the full counterattack of the laws of the heavenly Tao. Otherwise, if he dared to come to Pangu world with his true form at any other time, he would have been killed by the power of the heavenly Tao, or smashed to pieces by Diyu's tremendous force. Even so, he was still being rejected by the endless power of the heavenly Tao. 10 days was the time Lei Meng gave Wu Qi, and it was also the longest time he could stay in this world. Even with Dark Ein's celestial tower, Wu Qi could not resolve the rejection. No matter how Wu Qi sped up or decelerated, the flow of time was also a kind of power of the heavenly Tao, and Lei Meng still could not avoid the expulsion. 10 days is enough. Wu Qi glanced at King Baishan, whose face was unsightly, and suddenly laughed. "I've only killed 2 of your sons. Do you have to hate me so much? If you didn't go after Lu Bang, why did you come after me? If you didn't have an affair with Lu Bang, why did you kill your sons?" King Baishan's face darkened and he did not say a word. He just stared at Wu Qi and slowly pulled out his sword. An aura as hot as fire slowly poured out of King Baishan's body. Shockingly, he was also an expert of the 3rd Panga heaven. A mass of bright yellow energy shot out from the top of his head, in which a yellow dragon, several miles long, floated in the yellow cloud, its huge body bringing great pressure to those who looked at it. Lei Meng's face turned extremely serious. He showed 3 fingers to Wu Qi and said, "Little fella, Three primordial immortals. Here are 3, and you must give me 3 offerings in the future. Wu Qi nodded and promised. But you'll have to help me when the time comes, he said in a deep voice. Clapping his hands excitedly, Lei Meng laughed wildly and said, "That's a deal. You have a good reputation, I trust you." Amidst his laughter, he unleashed countless bolts of lightning that wrapped around King Baishan and his companions, including the 13 sun oracles. With his own power of thunder, Lei Meng had created a small world of thunder and lightning, ready to entangle King Baishan and the 2 supreme oracles around him with his own power. Hand in hand with Princess Zhanglu, Wu Qi also laughed and stepped into the small world manifested by the natural phenomena medallion. The vast black smoke rising from the formation of 10 extinctions was unleashed with a rumble, turning into countless evil spirits that charged toward Ao Buzan and the others with a murderous air. But as soon as the formation of 10 extinctions moved, the fiend-slaying sword formation in the periphery moved as well. A vast amount of sword energy transformed into thunderbolts and flames that came whistling over from all directions, blocking the attack of the formation of 10 extinctions. Ao Buzan and the others looked at each other helplessly. Lord Xianxing sat down helplessly on the roof of the palace and said, "I understand what Brother Wu Qi meant. If you don't step into the Dao realm, you will always be an ant. Now, we can only wait for the result." Thoughtlessly, Catfish Flooddragon pulled out 2 corpses from her storage ring, whose heads were smashed to pieces by her hammers. She opened her mouth and began to gnaw on them. While chewing, she said vaguely, "Don't worry, Wu Qi is very cunning. Although the cultivation base of his true form has not improved much over the years, his clones, Ao Buzan and the others all had sinister smiles on their faces. Yes, the cultivation base of Wu Qi's 18 blood-draining celestial fiends was constantly improving along with the cultivation base of Wu Qi's true form. Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu stepped into the small world manifested by the natural phenomena medallion. It was a lifeless continent with nothing but a boundless black desert. A gloomy and dry wind blew across the desert, raising large amounts of sand and dust in the air. The collision of the tiny grains of sand could actually produce huge thunderbolts. Countless grains of sand and dust surged into each other, and the void was filled with water tank-sized thunderbolts that danced chaotically in the sky. It was a world of lightning that Wu Qi had created based on Lei Meng's hometown. The white bone demon god, Guiyu, was covered in lightning. He was swinging a scythe with a long handle and slashing at the void. A few places had already been slashed by him, and the space was trembling under his tremendous strength. Fortunately, the natural phenomena medallion was an extraordinary artifact personally crafted by the sacred Emperor Zhuanxu, so it had a strong defense. Otherwise, with Guiyu's attack, this part of the void would have long been chopped to pieces by him. Seeing Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu step into the void hand in hand, Guiyu carried the scythe on his back and stared at Wu Qi with his eyes flashing with green ghost fire. "I hate this place. It looks a little like the fantasy realm of Thunderstorm, the birthplace of the Thunder Fiends, the mortal enemies of our clan." Wu Qi smiled, nodded, and said, "That's for the best. I'm here to kill you." Flicking his fingers, Wu Qi said, "How many virtues can the heavenly Dao give me for killing a fiend god who invaded this world?" Guiyu paused, then suddenly burst into wild laughter as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He laughed so hard that even his bones creaked, and all his teeth nearly flew out of his mouth. Chapter 8:16. After laughing wildly for a long time, Guiyu pointed at Wu Qi and said with a cold grin, "You want to kill me for merit?" Wu Qi nodded seriously. He stretched his neck and abruptly grew to about 100 feet tall. Purple golden dragon scales emerged all over his body, and a pair of 7-colored dragon horns slowly grew out of his forehead. Dragons were the gods of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. As Wu Qi transformed into a dragon man with the dragon kill, a dragon aura spread out in all directions. Countless thunderbolts shot out from the friction between the sand and dust in the air immediately began to spin according to Wu Qi's will. gradually turning into a whirlpool of thunderclouds with a diameter of 10,000 miles. A five-colored divine ray burst out from the top of Princess Zhongli's head. The avatar of the god of thunder slowly raised both hands in the shrine, gathering all the thunderbolts in its palms. Gradually, the huge thunderbolt compressed into a fist-sized purple thunderball. This was the strongest attack of the ancient god of thunder, the void-shattering divine thunder, a supreme thunder magic that could even blow up the primordial chaos. With Princess Zhongli's current cultivation base, this divine thunder was enough to pose a great threat to enemies who were several times stronger than her. Guiyu shook his head desperately, his white teeth clattering and making a mocking noise. He pointed at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "Dayu's secret palace's dragon kill. Years ago, I killed a man who was twice as strong as you and had also practiced the dragon kill. A genius who cultivates both fleshly body and magic is nothing in my eyes. My body is condensed from the pure yang ghost energy. Unless you are proficient in the art of subduing ghosts, what can you do to me?" After commenting on Wu Qi, he gave Princess Zhonglu a sidelong glance, shook his head, and said with a sigh, No. It's true that thunder magic is the strongest offensive magic for immortal cultivators like you, but the Ghost Fiend clan and the Thunder Fiend clan have been fighting for countless generations, and I'm proficient in all kinds of thunder magic. At most, your thunder magic can attack my pure yang ghost body with 30% of its power. How can you hurt me? Wu Qi could not help but laugh inwardly. This Guiyu was an honest fiend god. Before the fight even began, he had already revealed all his trump cards. The absolute yang ghost body condensed from absolute yang ghost qi? In this world created by the great Saint Pangu, he had never heard of the existence of absolute yang ghost qi. It must be some kind of spiritual energy unique to the Ghost Lair's hometown. However, he had underestimated her and Princess Zhonglu. This was unacceptable. A stream of chaotic energy rushed out from the top of Wu Qi's head, transforming into a dark-een celestial tower that was less than a foot in diameter, hovering high up in the sky. The flow of time in the small world inside the worldly phenomena tablet was accelerated by 2,000 times, and the range was limited to this small world. In the outside world, Lei Meng could hold on for 10 days under the banishment of the laws of the Great Path, so Wu Qi had 20,000 days to use. If he still could not deal with the Ghost Lair after more than 50 years, then he really could not do anything to him. The ghostly fire in Guiyu's eyes flickered. He stretched out his hands and waved them gently. A Tower of Babel that can control the flow of time? Amazing, you actually have such a rare treasure? Are you really going to keep me here? After asking Wu Qi, Guiyu did not wait for Wu Qi's answer. Instead, he suddenly opened his mouth and sprayed at Wu Qi with all his might. A plume of dark mist with an indescribable stench of corpses sprayed toward Wu Qi's head. The mist flew so fast that before Wu Qi could dodge, he was already wrapped up in it. The purple-gold dragon scales with amazing defensive power turned dull in an instant, and Wu Qi felt a burning pain all over his body. A large number of dragon scales lost their vitality and turned a lifeless grayish-white color. Dozens of dragon scales on Wu Qi's chest turned into white dust and drifted away from his body. The 1-foot-wide flesh on his chest had its life force sucked away by the ghostly aura, and like the dragon scales, turned into dead white dust and drifted away. Wu Qi was so angry that he laughed. His scroll of stealing was all about plundering external objects to replenish his energy. How could this Guiyu use ghostly aura to rob his life force? But it was indeed very frightening. The dragon scales, which even Princess Zhongli's ancient void-shattering divine thunder could not break, were shattered by Guiyu with just a puff of black smoke. What was the origin of this ghostly aura? With a cold snort, a glinting cloak suddenly appeared behind Wu Qi's back. He sped away in a beam of light and came in front of Guiyu in a flash, his fists smashing toward Guiyu's spine like shooting stars. Behind Wu Qi, Princess Zhongli let out a clear cry. The purple ball of thunder in her hand shot out silently and smashed toward Guiyu's sternum before Wu Qi could. Guiyu laughed strangely. Before Wu Qi's fist could get close to his body, his spine had turned into a clump of ghostly aura. The sticky, black ghostly aura transformed into dozens of ferocious bone claws, grabbing toward Wu Qi. As for the ancient void-shattering divine thunder that was shooting toward his chest, Guiyu just waved the scythe on his back and casually slashed at the ball of thunder. Wu Qi, who was rushing toward Guiyu, could not dodge in time, and the dozens of ghost claws had firmly gripped his body. The ghost claws formed from the pure yang ghost energy were extremely tough and possessed a tremendous strength. Wu Qi was grabbed by the claws and struggled for several dozens of times, yet he just could not free himself. When Guiyu saw that Wu Qi was trapped by his magic, he laughed even more complacently. The black scythe, which looked like it was made of bones, slashed heavily on the ball of thunder. In Guiyu's surprised gaze, the ball flashed and disappeared, then suddenly appeared in front of his chest and exploded. All the thunderbolts within a radius of 10,000 miles were condensed into a ball of thunder, which also contained a trace of the law of thunder that Princess Zhonglu had comprehended. The plasma-like thunderbolts spread silently and enveloped Guiyu's entire body. The purple-blue thunderbolts floated in the air like crystals, with Guiyu's body embedded in the huge ball of thunder like a fly in amber. The high-temperature thunderbolts burned his body and soul. Guiyu let out squeaky screams, and faint black smoke kept rising from his body. But, as he had boasted just now, he was proficient in the art of controlling and guarding against thunderbolts. Countless dense black talismans emerged on his pale bones, which reduced the damage caused by the thunderbolts to the minimum. The thunderball unleashed by Princess Zhonglu was the softest kind of the void-shattering thunder. Once it hit an enemy, it would stick to him like maggots on a tarsal bone, constantly erupting with soft thunderbolts that could completely wipe out the enemy's existence. But, facing Guiyu, who was much stronger than Princess Zhonglu, the thunderball was obviously not enough to hurt him. Accompanied by the strange laughter, the lightning around Guiyu's body was gradually extinguished, and his pale bones were exposed one by one. Guiyu looked at Princess Zhonglu and said with a hideous smile, "I've told you, how can you hurt me with such a small trick? This supreme tower is a good treasure. Even if I can't control it, it will be a unique treasure when I bring it back. I'll kill you now, then go out and kill everyone outside." Raising the scythe high, Guiyu lowered his head, smiled at Wu Qi, and said, "How can your close-range fighting skills defeat me, the pure yang ghost body?" The scythe could no longer fall down. Guiyu stared at Wu Qi in a daze. Wu Qi, who was imprisoned by his ghost magic, was looking up at him and smiling. His enormous body, which was thickly covered in dragon scales, was slowly glowing with a light that looked like molten gold. In Guiyu's shocked eyes, as if he had seen a ghost, Wu Qi's body gradually transformed from a dragonman's body into a golden Buddha with 4 faces and 6 arms. When Wu Qi was completely transformed into a golden Buddha, Guiyu felt that even the little bit of brain juice left in him was a little useless. Panicked, he looked at Wu Qi and screamed, "Aren't you a human warrior? Even if you are a cultivator of both body and magic, you can at most, even if you are a cultivator of both fleshly body and magic, you can at most practice some evil magic like the curses of the human oracles. How could you possibly practice the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League?" Guiyu wanted to tell him. Everyone in the world knew that the cultivation methods of the human race were incompatible with the mental cultivation methods of Buddhism and Taoism. Wherever the Pangu sacred energy went, all the Buddhist power and immortal power would turn into running water. Even for a Buddha of Buddhism, as long as he practiced the body-strengthening cultivation method of the human race, as long as the Pangu sacred energy entered his body, his golden Buddha body would slowly melt, and all the Buddhist power would vanish. He would no longer have the great power to subdue demons and devils. But Wu Qi was a freak. When he approached Ghostlair's body just now, he had clearly used the Dragon Kill, a divine ability that was secretly taught in Great Yu's secret palace. How could he transform into the avatar of the Buddha now? If Guiyu had known that Wu Qi possessed the divine power of Buddhism, he would not have let him get close to him. Even for ghosts and deities from outer realms, the divine power of Buddhism had a strong restraining effect on him. Most of the reputation of Buddhism for being the best at subduing demons and devils was forged by the white bones of various ghosts and deities from outer realms. Guiyu wanted to cry. He let out a strange cry and was about to throw Wu Qi away with dozens of ghost claws. Laughing strangely, Wu Qi opened his mouth and spat out 6 blood-red sword beams. 6 blood centipede swords whistled through the air and slashed at Guyu's neck like dragonflies skimming the surface of the water. The inborn spiritual weapon was extremely sharp and murderous. 6 beams of sword light fell one after another. Even though Guiyu's body was condensed from the so-called absolute yang ghost qi, his neck was still cut off. A strange head flew high into the air. Guiyu howled furiously, "How dare you trick me, boy? Strange, how can you use the divine power of Buddhism?" With an angry and puzzled howl, Guiyu's body exploded, turning into a sticky cloud of ghost energy that wrapped around Wu Qi. Guiyu's hideous laughter came from the ghost energy. "So what if you have the golden body of Buddhism? With your cultivation base, you are far inferior to..." Guiyu's laughter was once again interrupted by Wu Qi's action. Wu Qi slapped his own head, and 18 blood-red relics and 18 white relics flew whistling up from the top of his head. 36 relics emitted 2 different kinds of light, one of evil and the other of righteousness, that illuminated the void. Laughing strangely, 18 blood-red shadows rushed out of the red light, stirring up a boundless sea of blood and wrapping Guiyu in it. Meanwhile, the bright light emitted by the 18 white relics sprinkled on the ghost energy like flames. Wherever they passed, the ghost energy trembled like boiling water and kept making ear-piercing hissing noises. Guiyu let out a shrill scream and quickly transformed into a long stream of black smoke, darting up into the sky. But the 18 blood-red shadows clung to him with the sea of blood, not allowing him to escape. After being polluted by the blood sea, the black gas, which was originally flying fast, became extremely slow. The ghost howled in pain. "The nether blood sea of the 9 nether, how can such a filthy thing exist in this world?" Wu Qi paid no attention to Guiyu. He chanted the name of Buddha in a deep voice, and the golden body of Buddha slowly expanded to tens of thousands of miles tall. Sitting cross-legged, Wu Qi locked his hands into a lotus incantation gesture and gripped the void with a radius of 100 miles, covering the black smoke transformed from Guiyu. Word by word, a Buddhist mantra came out of Wu Qi's mouth, forming a golden ocean that wrapped the void tightly. After an unknown period of time, a despairing howl came from Wu Qi's palm. Along with a deafening rumble, a black pearl wrapped in a sticky green liquid flew up into the sky, smashing straight into the spot between Wu Qi's eyebrows. Chapter 8:17. In just the space of a breath, Lei Meng and King Baishan had exchanged hundreds of blows. Lei Meng was focused on attacking, while King Baishan was focused on fleeing. The two of them tumbled around in the sky, leaving many afterimages in their wake. It looked very lively, but it was not very effective. 2 supreme oracles standing next to King Baishan flicked their fingers. More than 30 thin and light bone talismans flew out of their fingertips and exploded into a sheet of black light that shielded the generals and oracles who were not strong enough. King Baishan gave a loud cry as a large amount of black liquid oozed out of his body and formed a black armor that looked as smooth as an insect's shell. The shape of the armor was very strange, with long, curved, oval plates everywhere, and many sharp spikes growing out of the joints. Lei Meng withdrew his 2 electric whips and held up a finger. "I was very happy that this little fellow had sacrificed the flesh and blood of immortals, so I promised him that as long as he gave me enough offerings, I would be the ancestral god of his clan. I thought it would take him at least thousands of years to gather the offerings I needed. Who knew that he had sacrificed the flesh and souls of all the living beings on a whole planet?" With a strange smile on his face, Lei Meng shook his head and said, "Tens of billions of living beings, not only human beings, but also demon cultivators and human cultivators, as well as countless insects, fishes, birds, and beasts. There are too many of them to count. There are so many powerful clans in Diyu, and even when they carry out a sneaky blood sacrifice, they only have to slaughter hundreds of thousands of living beings. How can they compare to this little fellow's generosity? After putting on the heavy armor, King Baishan looked like a walking longhorn, and there were even 2 long feelers growing out of his head. Holding a heavy single-edged axe in one hand, he leaped tens of miles into the air and swung the axes at the 2 huge lightning bolts overhead. The axes and the lightning bolts collided with each other. A blinding light enveloped the whole world, and a deafening rumble knocked the oracles and generals behind King Baishan flying backward. Countless electric arcs, each as thick as a thumb and tens of miles long, sprayed out of King Baishan's body. The terrible force of thunder bombarded his armor and scorched it. Layer by layer, the armor turned to ashes, but more black fluid gushed out of King Baishan's body, constantly condensing into new armor. Lei Meng. King Baishan stared at Lei Meng and growled, "I've heard of your name. You are the most overbearing fiend god in the outer heavenly realms, the vanguard of the Thunder Fiend clan. Ha! Over the years, in order to seize the blood offerings on Pangu continent, you have contacted many powerful clans of Great Yu. But they couldn't satisfy your appetite. What did that kid Tan Lang use to move you?" Lei Meng, who was chasing after King Baishan, was caught off guard and was firmly attached to the human skins. He of Meng of Shan of said, "Of Meng of Chi of Shan of Bai. The little fellow just wants me to hold you back. You don't have to work so hard, do you?" After the 9 altars were set up, the generals and oracles who helped the 2 supreme oracles took off their clothes. They stood in front of the altar in a group of 3. They took out sacrificial knives forged from black volcanic rocks and methodically sliced their foreheads. As if they could not feel any pain, they completely peeled off their skin. Then, like a butcher dismembering an ox, they cut open their stomachs, took out their internal organs, and placed them neatly on the altars. King Baishan and the many oracles behind him felt their scalps go numb, and they felt their hair stand on end. Wu Qi had sacrificed all the living beings on an entire planet? No wonder he could summon a fierce god like Lei Meng in his true form. King Baishan had traded the lives of more than 20,000 loyal subordinates who were in the realm of the second Panga heaven to summon the Ghost Lair. On top of that, the Ghost Lair had enjoyed generations of offerings from King Baishan's bloodline, and had a deep friendship with King Baishan. That was why he had reluctantly come in person. But what about Wu Qi? He had just called out softly, and Lei Meng had come to this world. A monstrous evil aura towered into the sky. Although Lei Meng had sealed off all the natural energy in this world, this evil curse did not require the use of natural energy. His body flickered rapidly as he struggled to resist the rejection of the laws of heavenly Tao in this world. But that did not stop him from wielding 2 huge electric currents in his hands and lashing at King Baishan and his men hundreds of miles away like 2 long whips. To Lei Meng, the electric currents were like his own limbs, and he could control them at will. The 2 whips condensed from electric currents had been compressed into a tangible form, ripping through the air and producing a dull rumble that tore the eardrums of the generals and Pekyang oracles around King Baishan, who were all peak level 9 stars second Panga heaven. Blood dripped down their earlobes. Lei Meng hovered in the middle of the void, tens of thousands of miles around him. This was his territory, a world of thunder and lightning he had built with his own enormous thunder power. Apart from the power of thunder, there was no other natural energy here, and this environment was the true face of the birthplace of the Thunder Clan. 2 supreme oracles cut their left wrists, and green fluid flowed out of their veins. Then, they began to recite an incantation in a low voice. Suddenly, the 27 intact human skins let out a shrill howl as they stood up, transformed into green evil spirits, and swooped at Lei Meng. Lei Meng was so angry that he cried out, "How dare you run away?" While King Baishan and Lei Meng were fighting Lei Meng, the 2 supreme oracles, who had been trapped in this part of the world with him, had deftly set up 9 altars made of bones with the help of a dozen generals and oracles. These altars were built with human spines and leg bones as their bases, and human skulls as their main bodies. 3 lamps made of baby skulls floated on top of each altar, filled with phosphorescence extracted from years of decaying corpses. Evil green light shone out of the lamp's 7 orifices, illuminating everything within 100 miles with a pale green hue. King Baishan wanted to criticize Wu Qi's behavior with the harshest words, but his accusation was weak. He had done a lot of blood sacrifices, and when it came to violating the human emperor's ban, many of the things he had done were even more shameful than Wu Qi's. Unable to accuse Wu Qi of taking the moral high ground, King Baishan became more and more exasperated. He tried his best to hack at Lei Meng. King Baishan rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to speak, Lei Meng suddenly let out a long roar and thrust his halberd at his heart. But for the sake of the flesh and souls of those 3 primordial immortals, I'll have to do my best, he cried out. But King Baishan was like a loach smeared with oil. No matter how Lei Meng tried to stab him, he just kept his head down and fled. Several times, Lei Meng almost turned him into a meat skewer, but each time, he missed by a hair's breadth. King Baishan threw his head back and gave a long roar, a dazzling bolt of lightning shooting out of his mouth. Lei Meng's force of thunder had already smashed into his body and was running amok in his internal organs. But King Baishan was one of the dozen or so most powerful kings of Diyu, and his cultivation base was extremely frightening. His internal organs had long been tempered to be as smooth and tough as purple crystals, so when the force of thunder ran amok in them, it only gave him a slight shock before he spat them out of his mouth. With a flicker of his body, Lei Meng appeared in front of King Baishan and thrust his halberd at his face again. King Baishan still did not fight Lei Meng. He just sneered and continued to flee with his movement technique. This was a world formed by Lei Meng's thunder magic. In this small world, Lei Meng possessed the power of a sovereign. He could appear anywhere at his will and attack the enemy by any means. With King Baishan's cultivation base, if he wanted to flee, not even 3 to 5 Lei Meng could stop him. After all, when one reached the realm of primordial, it was difficult to seriously injure a primordial expert, even if one had an overwhelming advantage in overall strength, unless they had more than 10 times the number of their opponents. King Baishan turned and fled without a care for his face. The halberd barely grazed his body, ripping half of his armor to pieces and exploding into countless sparks amidst the plasma. But the halberd had only torn a small hole in his back, turning his skin and flesh into charcoal. The sky was filled with bolts of lightning, and there was nothing but thunder. The air was filled with electric charges that made one's skin prickle, while the rest of the natural energy had completely disappeared. Large numbers of electric arcs had formed a tens of thousands of meters wide electric curtain in the air, twisting and drifting in the air like ghosts. Countless electric curtains like this filled everyone's sight. This was a hell of thunder that could bring despair to anyone. The halberd came piercing through the air like a bolt of lightning. When it was still hundreds of feet away from King Baishan's chest, a terrible force of thunder was unleashed. A great plume of plasma shot out and burned a huge hole in the armor on his chest. King Baishan cursed angrily, then turned and left, giving up the idea of fighting Lei Meng to the death. All the living beings on an alien planet. King Baishan's eyes turned red. He lunged at Lei Meng and swung his 2 axes at his head. How dare this bastard defy the human emperor's decree? Clearly, the axes in King Baishan's hand were not as powerful as the halberd. Lei Meng thrust the halberd forward casually and collided with the axes, shattering them in an instant. King Baishan grunted as tiny bolts of lightning exploded on his finger. The skin on one of his fingers was scorched, and drops of blood oozed out from under the skin and kept dripping down. When the 2 axes were still hundreds of feet away from Lei Meng's head, they suddenly exploded. In the next moment, a strange-shaped trident appeared in Lei Meng's hand, a twisted trident made of black thunderbolts that had condensed into a crystal-like material. Vaguely, one could see the spine of an unknown creature, hundreds of joints long, embedded in the handle. Each spine was densely covered with countless runes that shone with a dazzling light. Lei Meng's world had rejected all other natural energy, and only the power of thunder existed. But for an expert like King Baishan, who practiced the human body tempering technique of Hongmeng Panga Heaven, his need for natural energy was almost nil. With his formidable physical strength, he could fight any strong enemy, including the 2 bolts of lightning above him. Chapter 8:18. Just as the last wisp of his consciousness was about to be obliterated, he let out a deafening howl. He cracked the top of his head, and a black ghost core wrapped in a large amount of green mucus shot up into the sky. It was his natal core, and he was going to fight Wu Qi to the death. A ferocious and ugly ghost face flashed in the ghost core, and it suddenly expanded to about a mile in circumference. The natal ghost energy he had collected for countless years was about to explode. Wu Qi gave a cold snort and waved both hands. 6 blood-red sword beams shot whistling out of his palms, and the blood centipede swords hacked at his neck, chopping off his huge head with 3 sharp horns. He grabbed Guo Yu's body and swallowed it in one gulp. While laughing strangely, 18 blood-colored fiends rushed into Guo Yu's head and devoured his soul in just a few bites. His soul brand let out a shrill howl as he roared at the top of his lungs. "If you dare to kill me, the Ghost Fiend clan!" Wu Qi grabbed Guo Yu's soul seal and threw it to Catfish. "Eat him or do something to him," he said with a smile. "Just kill him." Wu Qi casually pointed a finger at the ghost core and cried out in a low voice, "This life is over. I'll send you to transmigration and let you be a new man in your next life." In the world conjured by the Natural Phenomena Medallion, Wu Qi sat cross-legged in the shape of a Buddha, his huge palms locked into a lotus incantation that firmly suppressed Ghost Fiend. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break out. The great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture cultivated by the Lord Buddha of the Buddhist League was very powerful. As soon as Wu Qi exercised the transmigration technique, a miniature 6 paths of reincarnation was formed in the lotus incantation. Every time the 6 beams of black and white light spun, a layer of the pure yang ghost energy around Ghost Fiend would be stripped away, and then swallowed by Wu Qi with the myriad harmonization grand magic. The ghost layer roared and struggled several times, waving its scythe to cut Wu Qi's palm. But Princess Zhonglu was standing on one of Wu Qi's fingers, watching the ghost lair. Every time the ghost lair launched an attack with all his might, the god of Scourge's golden body above Princess Zhongli's head would immediately emit a gray divine power that shone on the ghost lair. The ghost lair was instantly struck with bad luck and almost had his head chopped off several times. High up in the sky, the terrifying pressure of the thunder tribulation gradually converged here. Catfish Flood Dragon's primordial thunder tribulation had arrived. A vast expanse of purple clouds came rolling in from all directions. The yellow and black gas turned into a heavy downpour and fell whistling down, while the virtues of the heavenly Tao turned into torrents of bright light visible to the naked eyes and kept falling. 20% of them fused into the bodies of Wu Qi and the 18 blood-draining celestial fiends, 10% went to Princess Zhonglu, and the remaining 70% went to Catfish. Suppressed in Wu Qi's palm, the ghost lair cried out in despair and shock. "How is this possible? You are a human, but you can practice the Zen magic of the Buddhist League, and you can even devour my natal ghost energy. What kind of monster are you?" A fragrant aroma filled the air. Catfish's huge body was riddled with countless large bloody wounds, from which black blood sprayed out like spring water. Chunks of fish and flesh fell off from her body. When they fell to the ground, they turned into filthy blood with a foul smell, while a very faint fragrance of dragon saliva slowly spread out from the depths of her body. Wu Qi sat cross-legged in midair, with golden lotuses spraying out of his mouth from time to time. The mantras of the Buddhist League he was reciting had turned into huge golden runes that wheeled in the air, emitting a vast amount of bright light that formed into golden torrents that danced back and forth in the air. Every time the 6 black and white beams of light spun in Wu Qi's palm, the ghost lair would be reincarnated in the miniature 6 paths of reincarnation. Emotions of joy, anger, sorrow, joy, wealth, and humbleness, all kinds of chaotic scenes of the mortal world kept bombarding into his divine soul, turning his mind gray and no longer as smooth and clear as before. Wu Qi's eyes burst with golden lotus flames, which transformed into dozens of golden chains that locked the ghost core tightly. The ghost core, which was about to explode, suddenly froze. Then, Wu Qi clasped his palms together and slapped them hard on the ghost core. 18 blood-colored fiend shadows rushed into the ghost lair's body and began to devour the most deadly ghost energy in him. Lei Meng was trying his best to hunt down King Baishan, but he was caught by the vicious restrictive spells cast by the two supreme oracles around King Baishan. But the battle between Wu Qi and the Ghost Lair had reached a critical juncture, and the Ghost Lair was desperate. Gradually, Wu Qi's palm incantation changed from the Lotus Seal to the Reincarnation Seal. Once the seal was completed, the 6 paths of reincarnation in Wu Qi's palm would truly take shape. At that time, despite the Ghost Lair's supreme magic power, he would be thrown into the transmigration and lose all his mind. Even though he had supreme magic power, with his mind destroyed, he could do nothing but let Wu Qi do whatever he wanted, unable to fight back. Wu Qi burped, stroked his belly and said with a wry smile, "I'm stuffed. I'm so full. This guy's cultivation base is at the peak of the 8th tier primordial immortal realm. What a pity, why is he a ghost? Why did he run into us?" When they saw Wu Qi and Princess Zhang step out of the void, Ao Buzan and the others hurried over to them. Wu Qi looked up at the thundercloud hovering over them, about 1,000 feet in circumference, then nodded and said with a smile, "Lei Meng is really awesome. I've given him so many benefits and promised him so much. Catfish, catfish." Smiling complacently, Princess Zhang came up to Wu Qi's huge face and gave him a gentle kiss. Wu Qi possessed the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League, and Princess Zhang was proficient in all the ancient techniques of controlling ghosts. When the couple worked together, the Ghost Lair, who was a ghost, would naturally suffer a tragic fate. If it were Lei Meng, Wu Qi's divine ability of the Buddhist League would not be a deterrent to him. With his cultivation base, it was impossible for Wu Qi to defeat him. Before Ghost Lair could finish his threatening words, Catfish grabbed his soul mark and threw it into her mouth, chewed it twice, and swallowed it. Suddenly, a great mass of black flame as thick as ink surged out from under her feet and spread rapidly in all directions. Seeing that Catfish was about to raise a flood, Lord Xiansheng hurriedly reached out a hand and held the water wave within 100 miles of her. Ghost Lair's cultivation base was at least 100 times stronger than Wu Qi's, but the divine ability of the Buddhist League happened to restrain him, weakening his cultivation base by 100 times. On top of that, Wu Qi had the help of 18 blood-draining celestial fiends. The extremely filthy dark nether blood sea was attached to Ghost Lair's body, which was the filthiest thing in the world that even Ghost Lair could not withstand. His ghost body was contaminated by the blood sea, and he could only use less than half of his cultivation base. Princess Zhang smiled softly as she flew up into the sky. The 3 avatars of the ancient gods behind her expanded to a height of 100,000 feet, sprinkling down a dazzling rain of divine power. Her hands rapidly formed hand seals, and all sorts of divine characters in the primordial divine characters, such as imprison, suppress, purify, expiate, and other similar divine characters, fell like raindrops, continuously branding themselves on the pitch-black ghost core. The ferocious ghost face inside the ghost core twisted and struggled wildly, but in the face of the divine runes Princess Zhang had unleashed with all her might, its expression gradually became gentle and docile, and the ferocious face gradually transformed into the face of a rather handsome man. In comparison, the virtues obtained by 10 sovereigns were not as much as what Catfish had obtained today. What made Ghost Lair even more desperate was that Wu Qi's 18 blood-draining celestial fiends had stepped into the realm of primordial, and what they lacked was just a little bit of magic power and cultivation base. But now Guiyu was possessed by the blood-draining celestial fiend. His cultivation base was sucked away like a tide, while the blood-draining celestial fiend's cultivation base had advanced by leaps and bounds, and was now almost on the same level as Wu Qi. Wu Qi even felt that he had only taken a few breaths, and Ghost Lair had been suppressed by him for more than 40 years. At the same time, a vast pressure gradually poured out of the golden light. With the power of virtue, Catfish had successfully stepped through the threshold. This was equivalent to 19 primordial immortals joining hands to beat him. On top of that, it was the joint attack of the Righteous Buddhist League and the Blood Sea Fiend League, which suppressed Ghost Lair so much that he wanted to die in Wu Qi's palm. Suddenly, Catfish Flooddragon's body expanded to about 1,000 feet tall, and a pitch-black, sticky, and stinking fire of karma sprayed out from all over her body. The yellow and black energies of the heavenly virtue kept fusing into her body, and the fire of karma gradually dimmed. About a quarter of an hour later, the fire of karma on her body had vanished completely, and instead, a ring of golden light of virtue slowly emerged behind her head. Ghost Lair was a celestial fiend who had invaded this world, and was the target of the heavenly Tao's attention. He had been worshipped by King Baishan's clan for generations, and had sacrificed countless blood sacrifices to him every year. He had devoured the flesh, blood, and souls of countless mortals, so his sin of killing was 1,000,000 times heavier than Catfish's. It was true that Wu Qi had gained a great amount of virtue by draining Ghost Lair's cultivation base, but when Catfish devoured Ghost Lair's soul and completely destroyed him, the virtue was even more boundless. Ghost Lair threw his head back and howled in despair. He unleashed a monstrous ghost aura, trying to attack Wu Qi with all the vicious restrictive magic of the Ghost Clan. But as the golden light of the Buddha illuminated the sky, and Wu Qi's 18 white natal relics hovered over his head, all the restrictive magic that appeared were immediately turned into black smoke and dissipated by the light of the Buddha and the relic. The divine abilities of the Buddhist League were the nemesis of all evil, fiend, and demon cultivation techniques. It was an innate restraint, and Ghost Lair could not think of any other way. Ao Buzan and the others were still waiting in the palace. Wu Qi counted with his fingers and found that 8 days had passed in the outside world, and Lei Meng would be expelled from this world in 2 days. In order to refine Ghost Lair, he had stayed in the Natural Phenomena Medallion for 1,006 days. More than 40 years had passed in the blink of an eye, but to him and Princess Zhonglu, it was only a brief moment. As the power of virtue kept falling, Catfish's body was gradually enveloped by a strong golden light, and then a small figure gradually took shape in the golden light. In just a few breaths of time, Ghost Lair's head was sucked dry, leaving only a soul brand floating feebly in the empty skull. Wu Qi grabbed the soul brand with one hand, then transformed back into his human form, put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist, and strode out of the world created by the Natural Phenomena Medallion. 2 blood-draining celestial fiends carried Ghost Lair's huge head, which was about 1,000 feet in diameter, and followed closely behind Wu Qi. A stream of Buddhist Zen power smashed into the ghost core, and the face suddenly burst into a great sheet of golden light, then disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi gave a long laugh and swallowed the core, which contained 90% of Ghost Lair's power. The myriad harmonization grand magic was running at full speed, while a vast amount of chaotic energy rushed out and gradually melted the ghost core, which contained a great amount of power. Catfish Flood Dragon, with her big catfish head, strode up to Wu Qi, tilted her head and spat out a mouthful of saliva as she asked, "Why did you call me?" Chapter 8:19. The primordial thunder tribulation was the scariest of all the thunder tribulations in the universe. There was once an unlucky fellow who had worked hard to break through from the peak level of gold immortal to the primordial realm, but because he did not have a good treasure to deal with the thunder tribulation, he was struck by it. Not only did he die, but his planet and all his disciples were also smashed to pieces. Ever since she was young, Catfish Flood Dragon loved to eat flesh and blood, and countless mountain spirits and water demons in Meng Mountains had been killed by her. Occasionally, she would open her mouth wide and swallow some cultivators who passed by, never fooling around. Therefore, the evil karma around her was extremely heavy, and even the legendary fire of karma was attached to her. If Wu Qi had not drawn in the virtues of the heavenly Tao to cleanse her foundation and eliminate her evil karma, it would have been impossible for her to step into the realm of primordial in this lifetime. Even with the virtues of the heavenly Tao cleansing her foundation, and a golden halo of virtue emerging behind her head, she had turned from a fiend who had committed countless sins into a virtuous cultivator. Her evil karma in the past was too much, so the power of the primordial thunder tribulation was not reduced at all. Clearly, it was the most terrible primordial thunder tribulation, the yin and yang cycle clear thunder. There was only one strike of this primordial thunder tribulation, but its power was equivalent to the full force strike of a 6th-tier primordial expert. If she could survive it, she would step into the realm of primordial, and if she could not, her soul would be destroyed. Fortunately, Wu Qi was here. When he was still in the realm of Jin Dan, he could steal the power of the thunder tribulation to temper his fleshly body and soul. Now that he had stepped into the realm of primordial, and with the myriad harmonization grand magic, a heaven-defying divine ability, as soon as the primordial thunder tribulation gathered in the sky, a turbid aura sprayed out from the top of Wu Qi's head. The 9 souls of Taotais formed the 9 palaces formation, opening their mouths and sucking at the purple-red tribulation clouds that kept gathering in the sky. Strands of tribulation energy, each as thick as a water tank, were swallowed by the souls of Taotais, and then channeled directly into Wu Qi's body. This thunder tribulation was the purest and most powerful force in the world, and contained an infinite life force amidst its extreme destructive power. This was the principle of the yin and yang cycle. If he could get a small amount of it to temper his body, it would be an opportunity that even top primordial immortals dreamed of. It was a pity that such a thunder tribulation would only appear when the evilest gold immortals were breaking through the realm of primordial immortals. Even a first-tier primordial immortal like Amitabha would not dare to absorb the power of yin and yang lightning to temper his body when others were transcending their tribulations. However, Wu Qi was different. Before the thunder tribulation had even formed, he had already begun to steal the power of the thunder tribulation. No matter how fast the power of the thunder tribulation gathered, it could not compare to the efficiency of Wu Qi stealing the power of the thunder tribulation. Boundless purplish-red tribulation clouds emerged from the void, but they were unable to take shape. At most, they could only maintain a small area with a radius of 1,000 feet. Wu Qi absorbed the power of the thunder tribulation to his heart's content. His chaotic energy carried the power of the thunder tribulation and circulated it rapidly through his meridians. Wu Qi's internal organs, muscles, and bones were rapidly disintegrating under the extreme destructive power of the thunder tribulation, but in the blink of an eye, they were restored to their original state amidst the endless life force that sprouted after the destruction. The components of his body were changing rapidly between life and death. Like a blacksmith forging iron, Wu Qi's body was tempered thousands of times in a flash, making his fleshly body much stronger than before. For a day and a night, Catfish's body was rapidly transforming, and the primordial thunder tribulation in the sky could not take shape. 24 hours later, the purple tribulation clouds finally exhausted their last bit of power, and were all absorbed into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi threw his head back and gave a loud laugh, then thrust a palm backward and sent a thread of the thunder tribulation's power into Catfish's body. "All right, Catfish, if you don't transform now, King Baishan will have nothing to eat." A strange, hoarse, high-pitched, and ravenous roar rang out from the purplish-golden light that enveloped Catfish's body. Ao Buzan and the others were the first to be knocked flying away by the roar. The purplish-golden light faded away, and with the help of the last thread of thunder tribulation's power, Catfish, who had successfully transformed from a catfish into a true dragon, strode out of the light. Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were sizing up Catfish Flood Dragon. Curiously, Princess Zhonglu even stroked Catfish Flood Dragon's head. Standing about 4 feet tall, she looked like a teenage girl of 11 or 12 years old. Her chubby face was a little dark, which was obviously caused by the natural dark skin of a catfish. However, her facial features were very beautiful. Her slender body was clad in a short armor made from the dragon skin that had fallen off during her transformation. Her arms and legs were exposed, making her look like a stunted little doll. Her slender arms and legs looked as if they would break into pieces at any moment if a gust of wind blew past. Although she was so tiny, she was dragging a huge hammer crafted by Wu Qi for her with both hands. The handle of the hammer was 36 feet long, as thick as a human head, and the hammerhead was a square iron ingot, 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet thick. There was no decoration on the black hammerhead, just a piece of dark nether silver iron essence that Wu Qi took out from a neutron star in outer space. Just like Yuan Qing's big stick, The hammer was engraved with countless runes to reduce the weight of the hammer to about 108,000 kilograms. However, once it hit an enemy, the runes that reduced the weight of the hammer would collapse and the runes that increased the weight of the hammer would condense and take shape. The hammer would then be as heavy as a star in the void. With such a heavy hammer and Catfish's immense strength, the damage it could inflict was really frightening. In any case, even with Wu Qi's current cultivation base and strong fleshly body, he did not want to take the hammer head-on. That showed how powerful the hammer was. Off to the side, Elbuzen laughed strangely and said, "Such a tiny girl? She's not even enough to fill the gaps between my teeth." Ha! Catfish rolled her eyes when she heard Elbuzen say that, and was about to give Elbuzen a blow with the hammer. Hastily, Wu Qi grabbed her by the neck and threw her into the thundercloud that Lei Meng had transformed into. "Cut the crap. Elbuzen, you guard the outside and break the 10 Ultimates formation for me. Zixian, let's go in. It's time to see off that old fool King Baishan." Catfish cried out as she was thrown into the thundercloud by Wu Qi. Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu also strode into it. Amidst the boundless thunder and lightning, Lei Meng was beaten into a sorry state by King Baishan and 2 supreme oracles. No one knew where King Baishan had produced a pair of short 8-edged purple golden hammers. With every swing of the hammers, boundless cold air would rush out of them as he chased after Lei Meng and smashed him. Standing in front of 9 altars made of white bones, the 2 supreme oracles were waving their hands and chanting spells. 27 fiend shadows transformed from human skins were lying on Lei Meng's body, roaring and howling. These fiend shadows did not have a normal state. They rolled and crawled on Lei Meng's body like liquid, tearing at him from time to time. Each time they did so, they would produce a great deal of lightning. Clearly, Lei Meng was dragged down by these fiend shadows. His speed was getting slower and slower, and his energy was getting weaker and weaker. Occasionally, when he tried to stab King Baishan with the trident condensed from thunderbolts, he would miss the target because of these fiend shadows. He wanted to summon the power of thunder around him and turn it into an electric whip to kill King Baishan. But under the interference of the 2 supreme oracle spells, he seemed to have a problem controlling his own power. Plasma kept spurting out of his body, and his power was being sucked away by the fiend shadows. The Blood Soul Fiend Curse. Princess Zhonglu could not help but exclaim when she saw the fiend shadows attached to Lei Meng's body. They are really cruel to use 27 experts like that to refine a curse. They must have planned to use it against us. Wu Qi acted quickly. With a casual point of his finger, 6 beams of blood-red light shot out. The blood centipede sword let out a shrill whistle as it flew toward the 2 supreme oracles who were waving their hands and controlling the curse. Princess Zhonglu also clapped her hands. The silver lotus, which had completely transformed into a 5-colored lotus flower, spun out, turned into a plume of mist, and flew over Lei Meng's head, unleashing beams of colorful light to protect him. As soon as the colorful light touched the shadows, they let out shrill and unpleasant shrieks and tried desperately to get into Lei Meng's body. The 2 supreme oracles let out shrill shrieks as black smoke rose from their bodies. Dozens of grimacing fiend shadows wielding all kinds of strange weapons rushed toward the blood centipede sword. These fiend shadows existed between existence and non-existence. They looked solid, but at the same time, they looked like illusions composed of light and shadow. The blood centipede sword swept across their bodies, but failed to hurt them. Wu Qi was taken aback. These fiend shadows did not seem to be easy to deal with. While Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were fighting the 2 supreme oracles, Catfish was already charging excitedly at King Baishan with the big hammer on her shoulder. "Brother Wu Qi told me that I can eat you after I smash you to death. Don't run. Eat my hammer 1,000 times." It was not a lie, but 1,000 hammers smashed down on King Baishan like a storm. King Baishan, who was chasing after Lei Meng, was caught off guard. He could only swing his short 8-edged hammers to block the fiend shadows that came crashing down on him. He hurriedly raised his head to see what was ambushing him. When he saw Catfish's frighteningly huge hammer, King Baishan could not help but cry out involuntarily, "What the hell is this?" A loud rumble rang out as the two short 8-edged hammers were twisted into scrap iron, sending out a shower of sparks. In that instant, Catfish's hammer burst forth with a terrible gravitational force equal to that of a giant star. King Baishan's hammer was a rare divine weapon, but it was still dwarfed by the domineering weapon crafted by Wu Qi. Catfish Flood Dragon roared with laughter as she wielded the hammer and smashed it again and again. King Baishan had no time to dodge. Plumes of purple mist burst out of his body as he resisted Catfish's hammers with his fleshly body. During the first 300 strikes, sparks burst out of King Baishan's head, but he did not budge an inch. After another 300 strikes, flames burst out of King Baishan's 7 orifices as he continued to punch Catfish's hammers with his fists. After another 300 strikes, King Baishan coughed up a mouthful of blood, and then another mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of internal organs. When the last 100 strikes came whistling down, King Baishan could no longer withstand the terrible force, and his head exploded. Catfish burst out laughing. She grabbed King Baishan's headless body, opened her little mouth, and swallowed him in one gulp. A few crunching sounds rang out, and King Baishan, one of the kings of Deyu's imperial council, was swallowed by Catfish. Chapter 8:20. The mighty King Baishan was beaten to death by Catfish. Lei Meng, who had been chased by King Baishan for a long time, suddenly burst into a ferocious laugh. "This fellow has been chasing me for a long time. He has finally forgotten that this is my territory." Just now, Catfish had killed King Baishan with 1,000 hammers, not only because her hammers were too heavy and fast, but also because of Lei Meng's interference. Princess Zhonglu had helped him control the curse of the fiend shadow with a spell, and Lei Meng immediately recovered some of his strength. Immediately, he mustered the lightning in the surroundings and turned it into an invisible cage that locked King Baishan's body. Only then did King Baishan stand still and withstand the 1,000 hammers. Although King Baishan's fleshly body had been tempered to such a degree, he still could not withstand Catfish's continuous attacks. His head was smashed to pieces, and even his fleshly body was swallowed by Catfish. It was a miserable death. She patted her belly contentedly, then glared at the two supreme oracles, who were waving their hands and fighting with Wu Qi, and said angrily, "You are not good guys either." She gave a strange howl as she teleported 100 miles away with her hammers and smashed them down at one of the supreme oracles. The oracle gave a cold snort. An altar made of white bones suddenly flew up from beside him, and a great sheet of green light burst out of the lamp made of baby skulls, shining right on Catfish's body. Her skin, which was hit by the green light, bubbled and festered, while an invisible poison rushed madly into her body. Fortunately, her fleshly body was extremely strong, and her magic power and divine abilities were not to be underestimated. As soon as the poison entered her body, a great black wave immediately sprayed out of her festered skin. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, the waves turned into countless water arrows and shot toward the oracle. The poison in his body also poured out along with the waves. The water arrows carried with them a fishy smell. The poison swept through the void, and even the void was corroded by the poison, becoming extremely fragile. Dozens of small holes appeared in the void when the waves hit it. The two oracles screamed and stood back to back. The 9 altars hovered and rotated rapidly around them, and the green light emitted from the lamps made from baby skulls compressed into a green light screen that covered the area of 1,000 meters around them. One of the oracles snapped. "The king of East Sea Prefecture and King Baishan are dead. Why should we risk our lives? Isn't it good that we've settled our grievances? If you need any help from the Directorate of Celestials in the future, we will do our best to help you." Wu Qi snorted coldly. He glanced at the evil spirits that he could not kill with the blood centipede sword and said indifferently, "Oh? You don't want to fight anymore?" Wave after wave, the monstrous waves unleashed by Catfish Flood Dragons smashed onto the green light barrier. The biting cold water produced large whirlpools that swirled around the green light barrier with all their might. The light barrier shook violently, and both oracles had an unsightly expression on their faces. The priest who had just spoken hastily replied, "Indeed. Although our clans have served King Baishan's bloodline for generations, there's no need for us to die for him." With a gloomy face, Lei Meng moved over and growled through clenched teeth, "You don't want to fight anymore? Do you think it's that easy? Your flesh, blood, and souls are all mine. Even if the bones of you oracles can't withstand the oil, even if your souls are not much different from those of ordinary people, I'm going to chew you up bit by bit." The fiend shadows made of human skins were still wreaking havoc on Lei Meng's body. Although Princess Zhongli was doing her best to remove the curse, she could only slowly extract and disperse the monstrous evil power contained in these shadows. Lei Meng's body flickered violently, and from time to time, a great plume of plasma would shoot out of his damaged body. These fiend shadows had made him suffer greatly in the past 2 days. Even with his true form of a fiend god, he could not bear the terrible power that could devour his soul and destroy his bones, and even some of his essence energy was devoured by them. How could he not be angry? Wu Qi spread his hands helplessly and sneered at the two supreme oracles with a malicious smile. "Look, there's no other way. Lei Meng doesn't want to spare you, so..." The two supreme oracles sneered in unison and snapped, "Are you sure you can kill us?" Two pitch-black supreme towers flew out of their foreheads, swaying in the wind and turning into pagodas several miles tall, hovering over everyone's heads. The two supreme oracles shrieked in unison. Dozens of beams of pale green evil light shot out from the bottom of the pagodas and shone on the 9 bone altars around them. A ghastly evil aura swept out, and countless evil ghosts darted out of their bodies, lunging at Wu Qi and his companions with bared fangs and brandished claws. These evil ghosts were the same strange things that Wu Qi could not kill with the blood centipede sword. They were no longer evil ghosts, but evil spirits of the yellow spring raised by these supreme oracles with their own blood essence and souls. Wu Qi's blood centipede sword was extremely sharp, and it contained a wisp of innate killing intent that could kill all tangible and tangible things in the world. But the evil spirits of the yellow spring were dead creatures, and their life force was hidden in the yellow spring. Unless the yellow spring dried up, they could not be killed. Wu Qi's cultivation base was strong now, but how could he possibly dry up the yellow spring? If he used the divine abilities of the Buddhist League, he could easily release these evil spirits from purgatory. This was the saying that everything has its nemesis. But in front of Lei Meng, Wu Qi did not want to expose all his trump cards. He still needed to keep the golden body of the Buddhist League, so how could he let everyone in the world know about it? Seeing that countless evil spirits were coming at him, Wu Qi immediately cried out, "Disperse your world, Lei Meng. I have a way to restrain them." Upon hearing that, Lei Meng opened his mouth and inhaled, sucking countless bolts of lightning from 10,000 miles around into his mouth. In just a blink of an eye, this part of the world collapsed with a rumble. Wu Qi immediately raised his right hand and waved it, then cried out in a low voice, "Fiend-slaying sword formation, rise." The true forms of 360 Kunwu swords flashed and disappeared in the sky, and then endless starlight poured down, as if the sky was pressing down from a high place. Countless big stars were suspended less than 1,000 feet above the heads of the crowd. Then, the shadows of the swords flashed in the depths of the ground under everyone's feet. Even through the rock stratum that was hundreds of miles thick, the traces of the swords could still be seen. All of a sudden, a great plume of natural energy burst out of the ground, which converged into a mighty sword energy that swept across all directions, forming an insurmountable forest of blades and swords around the crowd. Then, the swords flashed rapidly around the crowd. Driven by the energy of the 5 elements, the energy turned into an invisible vortex that wrapped around the two supreme oracles, whose faces had turned pale with fear. Only a handful of people in the world knew that Wu Qi had obtained the Kunwu swords and the legacy of the Yellow Emperor's sword formation, but the reputation of the fiend-slaying sword formation was known to all the human race. Seeing that Wu Qi had used the fiend-slaying sword formation to kill them, the two supreme oracles shuddered with fear and fell to their knees almost instinctively. "We didn't know that the king of East Sea Prefecture is the successor of the sacred emperor. Please show us mercy." We'll serve you faithfully in the future and dare not disobey you." Wu Qi pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Forget it. You're only loyal to me because of 2 supreme oracles. If I kill you in exchange for virtues, I'll have a few more people around me who are as strong as you. They're much more reliable than you." The 2 supreme oracles were surrounded by entangled karma, and the fire of retribution towered into the sky. Their karma was thousands of times heavier than catfishes. God knew how many human flesh and blood sacrifices they had done over the years, and that was why they had such karma. Killing them in exchange for the virtues of the Great Path could at least allow a few people around Wu Qi to step into the realm of primordial. Compared with the 2 of them, Wu Qi was naturally more willing to trust his own people. The sword formation closed inwards. 2 shrill curses rang out, and the starlight in the sky flickered. Wu Qi unleashed his dark Yin celestial tower, which covered an area of 100 miles in circumference and rapidly accelerated the flow of time here. A day later, Lei Meng's time in this world had reached its limit, and he was helplessly expelled by the laws of the Great Path. Wu Qi took over the control of the sword formation. Pangu's sacred energy burst out of his body, and the 360 Kunwu swords shone brightly, truly unleashing the terrible power of the fiend-slaying sword formation. Compared to when they were in the hands of Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others, the power of the swords had increased by more than 10,000 times. As gold immortals, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others could not control the swords at all. They could only form the sword formation with a wisp of Pangu's sacred energy that Wu Qi had injected into the swords. But in order to control the sword formation, Wu Qi had to do it himself. After all, the swords were the supreme treasures of the human race crafted by the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan. If an immortal recklessly injected his immortal energy into the swords, he would be the first to bear the brunt and be killed by the swords. Inside the formation, it took Wu Qi 3 years to break through the defense of the 2 supreme towers and forcibly suppress the 2 supreme oracles. Their cultivation bases were far weaker than Wu Qi's, and the supreme towers they controlled were no match for the Kunwu swords. If Wu Qi wanted to kill them, he could have killed them with just 1 volley of swords. But if Wu Qi wanted to suppress them, he could only slowly consume their magic power. The 2 exhausted supreme oracles were dragged out. At Wu Qi's order, Ao Buzan, Lord Xianxing, Supremacy 3 Flame, Patriarch Jiang Yun, Patriarch Qing Xen, and Lu Chengfeng struck together and quickly turned the 2 supreme oracles into meat paste. The 2 supreme oracles had served King Baishan and done all kinds of evil. Now that they were killed, the heavenly Tao immediately sensed it, and an enormous amount of heavenly virtue came pouring down. With the help of the heavenly virtue, Ao Buzan and the other 5 immediately stepped into the realm of primordial. Wu Qi could tell that among the 6 of them, Lu Chengfeng had the hardest time entering this realm, and Ao Buzan had the easiest time. Almost as soon as the heavenly virtue entered his body, Ao Buzan transformed. He got rid of the huge black dragon head and stepped into the realm of primordial, then transformed the dragon head into a handsome middle-aged man with a dignified face. As the tribulation clouds slowly approached, Wu Qi immediately devoured them with the myriad harmonization grand magic. Ao Buzan looked up at the tribulation clouds, then condensed a water mirror to look at his current appearance. He looked left and right, reveling in his own image for a long time. At last, he breathed a deep sigh and said, "All the beauties under the heaven, no matter which race you are from, just you wait. Your big brother little fatty is back. Ha, the spear under Lao Tzu's crotch is going to be bathed in blood again." Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others were not as tasteless as Ao Buzan. They could feel the transformation in themselves. Chi bowed deeply to Wu Qi. Wu Qi, who was busy devouring the power of the tribulation cloud, nodded and smiled at them. There was a tacit understanding between them. Only Ao Buzan was shouting and moving his lower body forward. No one knew why he was so excited. Chapter 821. Less than an hour later, King Baishan told Wu Qi in detail how he had colluded with the crown prince of the celestial court and Liu Bang. He even told Wu Qi what Liu Bang had asked him to do, including the location of the armed forces he had prepared for this matter, and who in Liangzhu would obey his orders. Wu Qi carefully interrogated King Baishan, and in just an hour, he had found out the locations of more than 300 secret strongholds. On the surface, these strongholds had nothing to do with King Baishan. Many of them were just the most common civilian manors in Yuxiong Plain, and even the people living in those manors themselves had no idea how many priceless treasures were buried under their feet. King Baishan's entire clan was executed? Gao rushed excitedly to the stone couch where Wu Qi was lying, grabbed Wu Qi's hand, and cried out, "Are you all right, King of East Sea Prefecture?" Wu Qi's neck was broken, and his head was bent at a very strange angle as he squinted at Gao. The bizarre scene startled Gao, and even Princess Zhang Lu, who was waiting to watch the show, cried out in alarm. She hurried to Wu Qi's side with a gust of wind and carefully put his broken neck back together. A large sheet of green light burst out of Princess Zhang Li's palm, and a rich life force kept rushing into Wu Qi's neck. Gradually, Wu Qi's eyes regained a glimmer of light. "Your Highness," he gasped, "all my bodyguards and servants are dead, and I only have a few people left. Your Highness, you have to uphold justice for me. You have to go to His Majesty and ask him why King Baishan could openly besiege me with tens of thousands of soldiers." After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi nodded with a smile and said, "One last question. If you answer it, I'll let you die a quick death." What is Liu Bang's plan when he comes to you? Tell me your plan, and I'll give you a quick death." After thinking for a while, Wu Qi nodded slowly and said, "First it was the sovereign, then it was Prabhudaratna Buddha. Even the few primordial immortals I killed have become an excuse for them to threaten Goddess Nuwa. In this way, the more you forces those itinerant immortals, the better an excuse they have. No wonder they have been developing itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent all these years. They want to be cannon fodder for Diyu, and then use it as an excuse to go to Empress Was Palace to ask for an explanation." On a stone couch in the center of the main hall, Chi was leaning against an animal skin cushion. Hovering in front of him was a clump of black purgatory fiend flame, in which King Baishan's soul was twisting and struggling, howling at the top of his lungs. In front of him floated a clump of black inferno hell fiend flame, in which King Baishan's soul was writhing and struggling, howling at the top of his lungs. It was such a miserable scene, and together with the sharp aura emanating from the 9 Deaths spirit recovery pill that lingered in the hall, anyone with a discerning eye could tell with just one glance what kind of fierce attack Wu Qi and his personal guards had suffered. Coupled with the hundreds of miles of black desert outside the hall, everyone knew what had happened here. King Baishan heaved a long sigh and told Wu Qi everything about Liu Bang's plan with a ghostly howl. Every now and then, Huang Liang would tear a piece of paper from the thick book in his hand, and the general of East Sea Province standing next to him would grab the paper and rush out with dozens of elite soldiers. The papers recorded detailed information about King Baishan's secret strongholds, all of which had warehouses of various sizes, containing a large number of King Baishan's personal treasures. No wonder they could block the gate of Empress Was Palace, for they had occupied the absolute height of morality. He put away Kunwu swords and twisted his body. Cracking noises kept ringing out from inside his body, as all his bones broke into dozens of places at his will. It was an extremely shameless technique found in Scroll of Stealing, a technique that was specially used to feign death and escape from being hunted down. It was called the Spirit Serpent Tail Breaking Technique. By using this technique to break one's bones, one only needed to circulate the energy within 1 day and 1 night to reconnect the bones, and it would not cause any harm to the user's body. King of Han, Liu Bang, is just a newly recruited aide of the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court. I, King Baishan, and the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court have been working together for many years. In a corner of the Great Hall, a small alchemy cauldron was being propped up, in which Princess Zhang Lu was yawning as she concocted a cauldron of domineering 9 Deaths spirit rejuvenating pills. It was a military prescription handed down by the Directorate of Celestials, specially used to rescue the badly wounded and dying soldiers of Du on the battlefield. Wu Qi breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He struggled to grab King Yangshan's sleeve, put on a loyal face, and cried out, "Lord Lao Wang, I have something confidential to report to His Majesty, Your Highness, please." Of the two palaces Emperor Haozuan gave Wu Qi, only the main palace remained intact, while the other palaces had long been destroyed by the 10 Deaths formation and turned into black sand. In addition to the main palace, Wu Qi's 2 palaces and dozens of manors, as well as the gardens hundreds of miles around, had all turned into a decaying desert. Not even a blade of grass grew on the black, decaying soil, and only a few crows, who had come from nowhere in the past 2 days, were cawing on a few surviving rocks. Wu Qi whispered a few words into King Yangshan's ear, and the latter's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Recalling the extreme measures Du had taken against the immortals and itinerant cultivators of Pangu continent over the years, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. There had been too many people who could use him against them. Coupled with the fact that important members of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League had been killed during this period of time, the other side had enough bargaining chips. So many that if they were willing to put down their pride, even if Goddess Nuwa wanted to protect the human race, she could do nothing in front of those people. Time went by, and after another 2 hours, Wu Qi finally squeezed out the last copper coin from King Baishan. Satisfied, he knocked on the inferno flame that had trapped King Baishan's soul, then asked King Baishan with a smile, "Do you want to die a quick death?" Princess Zhonglu rushed over like a gust of wind, and the dozens of military officers of East Sea standing in the hall obediently stretched out their arms and legs. Princess Zhonglu swung her fists and punched their arms and legs. The sound of bones breaking rang out incessantly, and before long, each of these military officers had an average of 70 to 80 bones broken. One by one, Chi-Chi fell to the ground, moaning and groaning. King Yangshan strode forward and said in a deep voice, "Tan Lang, His Majesty has learned of the situation here. King Baishan was set free by someone, and His Majesty has issued an edict to execute his entire clan, old and young, men and women. Don't worry, this will never happen again." Carefully burning King Baishan's soul with the fiend flame, fearing that he would be finished in an instant, Wu Qi carefully interrogated King Baishan for all the information he was interested in. Standing beside the stone couch, Huang Liang's eyes gleamed with a golden light as he wrote down all the information King Baishan had told him. Gao opened his mouth, but he could not speak. After listening to King Baishan's confession, Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then crushed the inferno flame and crushed King Baishan's soul. Interesting. Lu Bang's scheme is really not to be underestimated. Does the Celestial Court want to control Pangu continent? But is that enough? Before long, the sound of rumbling footsteps rang out as King Yangshan, Gao, and a large number of Du's courtiers strode into the Great Hall, escorted by numerous soldiers. As soon as Gao entered the Great Hall, he was startled by the military officers of East Sea, who were groaning in pain on the ground. Their bodies were riddled with broken bones, and some of them had clearly suffered a severe blow to their chests. From time to time, bloody red bubbles gushed out of their mouths, and their eyes were rolled back. It was clear that they were on the verge of death. Just like the name of this pill, it was a tyrannical pill that had a 90% chance of death upon consumption. Those who were seriously injured still had some hope of coming back to life, but ordinary people who took it would die from the excruciating pain in their internal organs. When the Directorate of Celestials created the prescription, a large number of people died on the spot because of the pain. Among 100 people, less than 10% could survive. The most precious treasures of King Baishan's bloodline were all in these secret strongholds. If Wu Qi could get his hands on all of them, it would not be a problem for him to pay the astronomical amount of natural treasures needed to lift the restrictive spells. After pondering for a long time, Wu Qi's eyelid twitched suddenly. Through his divine sense, he found that the man he was waiting for was not far away. He pulled out a Kunwu sword and slashed it hard at Huang Liang's thigh. With a crack, the bones in Huang Liang's leg broke. He howled and rolled on the ground, clutching his thigh and moaning. Since the Inferno Hellfiend scripture was famous for its purgatory, it was easy to imagine how vicious and sinister this cultivation technique was. Wu Qi used the Inferno Hellfiend flame to refine King Baishan's soul, and in just an hour, King Baishan had obediently told him everything Wu Qi had interrogated him. At this time, King Baishan did not even hope to be reincarnated. All he wanted was for Wu Qi to destroy his soul. That would be the greatest happiness for him. Some of these treasures were rare natural treasures, some life-prolonging medicines, some extremely powerful talisman armors secretly crafted by the Directorate of Celestials, and some were all kinds of treasures that were prohibited in Great Yu but highly sought after by the immortals. Some of these secret strongholds were left behind by King Baishan's ancestors, and the precious treasures in them were piled up like mountains. They were not something a nouveau riche like Wu Qi could compare with. King Baishan's soul stared blankly at Wu Qi and said, "Just let me die. What else do you want?" Fortunately, Wu Qi now had many experts under his command, and he had enough men to use. He had sent hundreds of men to dig out all the treasures in King Baishan's strongholds in the shortest time possible. As for the treasure vault in King Baishan's mansion in Liangzhu, it was already Emperor Haozuan's private property, and Wu Qi had no interest in going there to stir up trouble. With difficulty, Wu Qi turned his head to look at Gao. With a crack, Wu Qi's neck bone broke in two. Feebly, he squeezed out a few words. "Your Highness? Isn't King Baishan imprisoned in the imperial prison? Why did he appear in the palace last night?" The soldiers of Diyu had strong fleshly bodies, but once they were seriously injured, they could not absorb Pangu's sacred energy to heal themselves, and their strong fleshly bodies would bring great trouble to the doctors. At least, ordinary medicine could not penetrate their strong fleshly bodies. The 9 Deaths Spirit Recovery Pill was a peerlessly tyrannical first aid pill. If a soldier was seriously injured and on the verge of death, there was a chance that he could save them by giving them a pill. But, should he inform Emperor Haozuan of the specific information? The entire hall was filled with the sharp medicinal smell of the 9 Deaths Rejuvenating Spirit Pill, which was as sharp as a knife's edge. Just by smelling it, the few generals of East Sea Province standing at the entrance of the hall felt as if someone had punched their noses, and tears and snot were about to flow out of their eyes. They looked in horror at Princess Zhang Lu, who was squatting and yawning in a corner of the hall, wondering how terrible the pill she had concocted was. Chapter 822. King Baishan had rebelled and colluded with immortals to plot against Diyu. When the news that Wu Qi had told King Yangshan was sent back to Liangzhu, Diyu was shocked, and the city was plunged into chaos. As the most important witness and the most direct victim, Wu Qi, who had dozens of broken bones in his body and had just reconnected them with a 9 Death Spirit Rejuvenating Pill, was ordered by Emperor Haozuan to follow the imperial guards of Diyu, who had come to pick him up, to the city. While dozens of giant flying ships were flying in the sky, the city was ringing with a loud bell. It was the alarm bell that Diyu would only ring when he was in great danger. King Yangshan stood on the bow of the leading ship, while Wu Qi, who had just recovered from his injury, but was badly injured, stood trembling beside him, while Princess Zhang Lu carefully supported Wu Qi. Princess Zhang Lu, who had been tough and strong, now put on a look of a wronged wife, her eyelids drooping and tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. She looked as if she would not live alone if Wu Qi died. Coupled with Wu Qi's pale face and the wisp of gray smoke between his eyebrows, the two of them looked miserable and cold, which suited Wu Qi's current situation. His palace was invaded, and everyone was killed from top to bottom. Of the tens of thousands of guards and personal guards around him, only a few dozen generals with the highest cultivation bases were left. Anyone who had encountered such a thing should be in the same situation as Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu, right? From time to time, King Yangshan turned to look at Wu Qi, quickly calculating Wu Qi's current situation in his mind. He had not expected Wu Qi to be seriously injured. King Baishan was the king of Diyu's imperial council, who was as famous as him and had great military power. It was only natural that Wu Qi would be seriously injured when he summoned 2 or 3 supreme oracles to plot against Wu Qi. But the strength around Wu Qi was a little beyond King Yangshan's expectation. It had only been a little over a year since Wu Qi was conferred the title of King of East Sea Prefecture, but he had already gathered dozens of generals who were at the peak of the realm of Second Panga Heaven. Presumably, he had used the time acceleration ability of the Supreme Tower to cultivate such a group of capable subordinates. A man who cultivated both fleshly body and magic, who had stepped into the realm of Supreme, and who was conferred the title of King of East Sea Prefecture, should not only focus on winning him over, but should also try his best to win him over to his side. It was true that his son, Gao, was a good friend of Wu Qi, but how could he make Wu Qi truly one of his men? After giving a quick glance at Princess Zhonglu, who was beautiful and naturally exuded a noble bearing, King Yangshan began to think about how many unmarried daughters he had in his house, and they had to be the kind of daughters whose mothers were of high status. Otherwise, he would be too embarrassed to give a maidservant daughter to Wu Qi. Facing the strong wind that blew against his face, Wu Qi coughed softly and said, "Lord Lao Wang, have you told His Majesty what I've told you?" King Yangshan, who was lost in thought, was taken aback. He looked at Wu Qi, nodded, and said, "His Majesty is furious, and the whole court is shocked. No one expected that, as a member of Great Yu's imperial clan, King Baishan's 4th-generation great-ancestor was my brother in terms of seniority. I never thought he would do such a treacherous thing." After pondering for a moment, King Yangshan sighed and said, "Escaping from the imperial prison without permission and leading an army to attack an important minister of Diyu, these 2 crimes are enough to get his whole clan beheaded. But the other things King Yangshan mentioned, it's not that I don't believe them, and it's not that His Majesty doesn't trust you, but it's just too sensational. That's why I want King Yangshan to go to His Majesty and explain it to him in person." Wu Qi nodded slowly and said nothing. King Yangshan narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "It's a matter of great importance, and even I can't believe it. I can't believe that Yu Xiong army, who guards Diyu, has actually betrayed him. That Yu Xiong army was the core army of Diyu's imperial army, specifically chosen from the members of Diyu's imperial clan and aristocratic clans. More than 60% of them had the bloodline of the imperial clan, and they were the most elite, loyal, and reliable strategic force of Diyu. Yu Xiong army was extremely large, and all its supplies and equipment were of the best quality in Diyu. It was divided into 5 armies, the left, the right, the front, and the middle, and they were responsible for guarding Liangzhu and the imperial palace of Diyu. They were the human emperor's personal army. The predecessor of this army was the invincible army of the human race, which the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan had used to conquer all the fiends on Pangu continent. Whether in terms of tradition or actual combat prowess, Yu Xiong army was the #1 army of Diyu, and no other army under the heaven could beat it. In terms of combat prowess alone, all the reserve soldiers of Yu Xiong army were elites who had reached the peak of the first Panga heaven, and only those who had broken through the realm of second Panga heaven could be considered as official soldiers of Yu Xiong army. Even the lowest-ranking soldier in Yu Xiong army was a lieutenant, and he was divided into 3 grades: lieutenant, colonel, and general, which corresponded to the realm of the 9 stars realms of the second Panga heaven. But when Wu Qi told King Yangshan that he had found out from King Baishan's soul that something had happened to most of the soldiers in Yu Xiong army, it not only frightened King Yangshan out of his wits, but also nearly made Emperor Haozuan fall off his throne. Putting aside the strategic force of Diyu like the secret palace, Yu Xiong army was the strongest army of Diyu, and it belonged to the category of an important weapon of the state. If something were to happen to Yu Xiong army, the whole state of Diyu would be shaken. The soldiers selected to join Yu Xiong army were all the descendants of Diyu's imperial clan and Diyu's noble clans. If something were to happen to them, wouldn't it mean that the clans behind them were disloyal as well? Therefore, even though he knew that Wu Qi was seriously injured, at Emperor Haozuan's order, King Yangshan had no choice but to escort Wu Qi to Liangzhu on 30 giant flying ships with 3,000 soldiers of the right Yu Xiong army, together with a private guard from his mansion. after killing the sovereign Jiao, King Yufeng, was rewarded by Emperor Haozuan and given the command of the Right Yuxiong army in Liangzhu. Therefore, when he escorted Wu Qi to Liangzhu this time, he had specially transferred 3,000 reliable soldiers from the Right Yuxiong army to Liangzhu. The palace where Wu Qi was attacked was less than 100,000 miles away from Liangzhu. With the speed of the flying ships, it would only take them an hour to reach the short distance, which was equivalent to the outskirts of Liangzhu. With 3,000 elite soldiers of the Yuxiong army and some of the elites from King Yangshan's mansion accompanying them, there was no way anything could go wrong. If anyone dared to attack the convoy outside the city, they would be courting death. It was quiet on the bow of the ship. King Yangshan was in a complicated mood. On one hand, he was thinking about how to win over Wu Qi completely, and on the other hand, what he should do if something really happened to Yuxiong army. Based on what King Yangshan knew about the ultimate power of Diyu, if something really happened to Yuxiong army, all it would take would be a thorough purge, killing all the soldiers of Yuxiong army. The scariest thing was that the soldiers of Yuxiong army were involved in more than just themselves. With a wry smile, King Yangshan shook his head gently and sighed. Looking at King Yangshan, Wu Qi also shook his head gently and sighed. Then he turned to the two generals of Yuxiong army, who had come up behind him quietly, and asked in a deep voice, "Generals, why are you here without being summoned?" King Yangshan was lost in his thoughts just now, so he did not notice what was going on around him. Gao was frowning and thinking about something, so he did not hear what was going on behind him either. But Wu Qi had already locked down the space tens of thousands of miles around him with his divine sense, so the movements of these two generals of Yuxiong army, whose cultivation bases had reached the peak of the 9 stars realm of the second Pangu heaven, could not be hidden from him. Upon hearing Wu Qi's voice, Gao hurriedly turned to look over his shoulder. Arching his brows, he cried out in a deep voice, "Dongyi Huang, Dongyim, what's the matter?" Clad in heavy armors, Dongyi Huang and Dongyi Mo put their right hands on the hilts of the sabers hanging from their waists and cried out in a low voice, "King of East Sea Prefecture, you can't enter Liangzhu." Wu Qi and Princess Zhang looked as usual, just looking at them with a faint smile on their faces. King Yangshan and Gao's faces flickered. "How dare you? Do you know what you're talking about? What do you want?" Dongyi Huang and Dongyi Mo were the left and right military ministers of Yuxiong army and Gao's assistants. One was in charge of the daily training of the soldiers, and the other was in charge of the logistics and distribution of supplies. They were veterans of Yuxiong army, and also Gao's right-hand men in controlling it. But judging from their words and deeds today, it was clear that Wu Qi was right. Something was really wrong with Yuxiong army. It was Emperor Haozuan's imperial edict that Wu Qi was allowed to enter Liangzhu. What Dongyi Huang and Dongyi Mo had said just now was a clear sign of disobeying the imperial edict. In Diyu, which valued tradition and laws the most, this was definitely a felony punishable by death. Dongyi Huang let out a long roar, drew his saber, and thrust it at Wu Qi's heart. Wu Qi took a step back unhurriedly, but King Yangshan was already in front of Wu Qi. His right palm struck out like a bolt of lightning and slapped Dongyi Huang's chest before the saber could reach him. King Yangshan was a supreme expert whose physical strength had broken through the level of Hongmeng Panga heaven, and before his iron palm, Dongyi Huang's body was as fragile as tofu. A crisp sound rang out as Dongyi Huang's upper body exploded, and a soul, dripping with blood, was caught in King Yangshan's hand. But, taking advantage of the brief moment when Dongyi Huang drew his saber, Dongyi Mo pulled out a black skull about the size of a fist. He bit off his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood onto the skull. Immediately, a shrill cry of a child rose into the sky. Upon hearing the cry, King Yangshan and Gao shrieked as dirty blood sprayed out of their 7 orifices at the same time. Fortunately, both of them had extraordinary treasures specially crafted for their souls by the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials. As soon as their souls were shaken, the treasures were activated to protect them. 2 balls of red fire enveloped King Yangshan and Gao. Coughing up mouthfuls of blood, They stared fixedly at the black skull in Dong Yimo's hand as if they were looking at a ghost. Clearly, they recognized the skull and knew who it represented. Seeing that King Yangshan and Gao were seriously injured by the cry, Wu Qi immediately exercised his cultivation base and forced a large amount of cheap blood out of his 7 orifices. The blood was transformed from chaotic energy, so Wu Qi did not feel any pain at all when he coughed out 30 to 50 kilograms of blood. A great amount of blood gushed out from the wound, and very soon, Wu Qi's entire body was dyed red. Drops of blood flowed down his body and onto the deck, making him look extremely miserable. Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi tilted his body and leaned into Princess Zhongli's arms. Princess Zhongli gave a cold snort. A 5-colored divine ray rolled out from behind her, and the avatar of the god of thunder, wrapped in a faint glow of lightning, spun out of it. A red thunderbolt as thick as a water tank appeared out of thin air, smashing heavily onto Dong Yimo's body with a terrifyingly high temperature. Dong Yimo howled miserably as he was turned into a wisp of smoke by Princess Zhongli's thunderbolt. But the black skull spun up into the air and let out a shrill cry, transforming into numerous black ripples that rushed toward Princess Zhongli. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.